And I understand everybody out there, both of you that are listening right now. I totally understand the confusion. You're hearing this song and you're saying to yourself, oh, young Jedi Eddie Garrison. I know that Jake, the old man in the room, had said at one point that it'd be fun to play Loverboys working for the weekend, getting set on Fridays to get everybody ready for the weekend. But what's Eddie doing? It's only a Tuesday. No, Eddie's right. It is a Friday. It doesn't feel like it, admittedly.
No, it does not.
Getting right back into a couple days off, Eddie. Let the rust set in. But here is the big story right out of the box on this Friday.
I'd have to have something to get rusty. I'd have to have some sort of talent there, Jake.
It's hard for the rust to settle in over that insulation,
Thank
right?
you. Yeah, that's right.
Here's the big story on this Friday. Right to it. Right off the top, we will let you know this. Do you have Eddie Garrison, the breaking news sounder, by chance? On this Friday, 2 days after Christmas and getting set for the Colts heading to New York to take on probably the worst team in the National Football League. The Colts, of course, needing to win both of their remaining games. This game against the New York Giants out east, and then coming back at home and finishing against the lowly Jacksonville Jaguars. Should the Colts do that, and with help from other teams, notably Denver and Cincinnati, and the way they finish out, as well as the Chargers, the Colts still have a faint hope of making the playoffs. But all signs at this point are indicated towards Anthony Richardson, their quarterback, not being on the field on Sunday for the penultimate game of the season. That is not to say definitively that decision has been made, but if you go by precedent and if you go by what typically happens, a Friday practice session is indicator as to whether or not a player is deemed by the franchise to be available for Sunday, because if somebody is a spectator, more often than not, that means they're going to be a spectator on Sunday. And with practice getting underway right now out at the Colts complex, those on site, James Boyd, Stephen Holder, all reporting quarterback Anthony Richardson a spectator as practice is getting underway. He has not practiced this week with foot and back soreness. Now, somebody pointed out to me, and I'd have to look, Eddie, if you could, at the NFL schedule. We're at that time of year where it always becomes odd, right? Like last night, am I the only one last night that was like, wait a minute, there's a game tonight? And then you're like, oh, yeah, it's Thursday Night Football. You forget it was Thursday night, right?
Yep.
Did you watch that game by chance?
Well, I was doing the Pacers game, and then once that game finished last night against the Oklahoma City Thunder, I did turn it on, and I'm like, why am I watching this? Why? Why?
Here is would you like to know the conspiracy theorist in me?
Watching paint dry was probably more entertaining than that last night.
It was bad. It's really bad.
What's
Seattle
your conspiracy
beating
theory?
Chicago 6-3.
Is this a tinfoil hat, Jake?
A bit of one, yes, if you'd like to go ahead and. The Colts are scoreboard watching 3 teams because of the scenarios, and we've run them down. It's vast. But, for example, for the Colts to get in, the Chargers have to lose out, correct?
I think so.
Or they have to have the Bengals, win out because there's a weird thing with 3-way ties, etc. The Colts play on Sunday. The Colts are waiting to see if Anthony Richardson's back and foot are going to be feeling good enough for him to go out there and play. However, when the Colts arrive, presumably later tonight or tomorrow morning in New York to their hotel, they're going to sit around and perhaps enjoy watching a football tripleheader. Saturday NFL variation. Guess who plays in game number 1?
The Chargers.
The Los Angeles Chargers.
Go Chargers,
at New England. Now, it seems unlikely that New England would pull that upset. But if New England defeats the Chargers, Colts playoff hopes stay alive. Chargers win that game, Colts playoffs chances are done, right? Except for then they've got to wait and see what happens with Denver and Cincinnati. Guess what? Those two play each other on Saturday. If after Saturday things fall the way that eliminates the Colts from playoff contention, and they know that they have nothing to play for in terms of the postseason, does that actually become the biggest factor in whether or not Anthony Richardson plays on Sunday? If they know going into the Sunday game, when they go to bed Saturday night, all nestled in their bed, the visions of playoffs still dancing in their head, if that is still a possibility, does that tip the scales towards Anthony Richardson is out on the field for them taking on the Giants, as opposed to if things happen on Saturday where they know that they are eliminated and therefore they decide not to put him out there? Are those things factors? That's the question that I have. But we won't know that until probably on Sunday. And at that point, it may be a game time decision. We shall see.
What are your thoughts on that? Resting him the final 2 weeks.
Well, here's the thing. If they are meaningless games, and you feel, there are two ways to look at this, Eddie. Vision number one. To be a quarterback in the National Football League means that at times you go out and you fight through and not everything's perfect.
Mm-hmm.
I truly believe that in the NFL, players are 100% healthy once.
Week one?
Week one.
And maybe even week one.
Correct. I just think your body, part of becoming, and I'm not saying that Anthony Richardson has not done this, okay? So what I'm about to say is not exclusive to Anthony Richardson. In general, part of being a professional in the NFL is understanding pain tolerance and pain threshold and working through that. That is probably unfair. That is probably unjust, but it's also why they get paid an exorbitant amount of money and go through the things that they do and have, like if you were to go to the facility and see the nutritionists they have and the treatments that they get and everything else. I mean, their body is a brand. It is a product, okay? So knowing everything that goes into having to play on Sunday and fighting through that and knowing your own threshold is part of learning and the process of developing as a professional. So for Anthony Richardson, one would think in Vision A here of the two answers of what you asked,
mm-hmm.
If Richardson is not 100%, but is able to play, and it is a game that is meaningless in terms of the playoff standings, maybe you put him out there just because you want him. You don't feel that his injuries are such that can compound to making his availability next year compromised. And so therefore you put him out there because he needs to learn, not he, all players, as young players need to learn and understand and develop and become used to the process of playing when you're not 100%. So maybe lesson learned there, good experience in that regard, part of the process, part of the maturation, part of the, if this is college for Anthony Richardson, that's one of the electives that he's got to take. His major is to be a great quarterback, but one of the electives he's got to take is, playing through pain, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So then you say, okay, let's do that. Now, the other side of it is, if the playoffs are in play and you look at Anthony Richardson and you say he is clearly not 100%, he is playing through pain, but right now he is at 70%, and we feel, and only they would know, we feel like a 70% Anthony Richardson gives us less chance to win than does a 90% Joe Flacco. So we'll go with Joe Flacco because that gives us the better chance to win. That's the other thing that they could see and say, you know what, let's go with it. And then option 3 is the fact that they put it all together and they say, look, there's a game we have to have. It's a game that we got to win in order to keep our playoff chances alive. And Anthony Richardson, going back to A, is a little dinged up. He's got to learn that this is a situation, the combination of the emotional pressure of what's at stake and the physical pressure of his body, he's got to go out there and play.
Mm-hmm.
Only they will be able to determine those things. My assumption, though, is that if he is dinged up and they have nothing to gain by winning the game, that they probably have him take the last 2 weeks to watch and learn from the sidelines.
So you're saying if the game means something, as if Denver loses to Cincinnati or LA loses tomorrow, they both lose, Denver and the Chargers, then he should play. But if they both win, then he should not play.
I'm simply saying, yes, I'm saying if the playoffs are not a possibility and there's nothing to be – what I'm saying is that's up for the Colts to decide.
Okay.
If it were up to me, I would look at his injuries, and if they are injuries that are the kind of thing that can compound and compromise him for next year, then I would not play him. But I do feel like these are barring that, I would play him just because I think that there are still stuff that can be gained. There are still lessons that can be learned. There are still reads that can be seen, etc. Mm-hmm. Now, again, Eddie, you go back to, though, if the foot injury is limiting his mobility, right now Anthony Richardson's, what he brings to the table is mobility.
Yep.
If Anthony Richardson is not able to carry the football, then having him as your quarterback is literally like having the guy that is supposed to bring Jell-O shots to your pitch in and taking gelatin away from him, right?
Yeah.
So he brings like red water, and you're like, this what's this supposed to be? This is supposed to be Jell-O. Well, I don't have any gelatin. Well, then you're not bringing a lot to the table here. At this point in his career and where he is with Anthony Richardson's completion percentage, clearly, and yes, when Jonathan Taylor's running for 2.5, and when Anthony Richardson's running for 70 yards, then yes, you can win on the ground. But there's also another reason beyond that he only threw 11 passes last Sunday. And it's because, quite frankly, they don't trust him to throw more than that because the accuracy issues are still in play. And only they know whether or not he can work his way through that and whether or not these last two games, and that's what I'm saying, maybe they see these last two games as we've got to get him out there. Maybe the best thing for him, Eddie, to be honest with you, is if there's nothing to be gained by just having him go out and just work pass reps.
Yep. That's where I stand. No matter what the case is, if he can play, I want him out there because he doesn't have the cachet, nor does he have the security, the job security to go out there and just not play. Like, he hasn't shown anything this year to me, really, Jake. Like, you go into next year as of right now, and you still have the same question you entered this year with. Is he the franchise guy? Is he the guy? And you don't have an answer. I know Kevin Bowen will probably talk about that at 2 o'clock as one of the things coming into the year was, do you have any clarity on whether or not you're going to pick up that fifth-year option? And right now, you have no clarity.
Now, somebody just pointed this out to me, and I think it's a great point. And by the way, Pacers last night, tough one at the Fieldhouse. We'll get to that as well as a big topic for today, and something that I saw that I think the Pacers can learn from last night. But if you look at Anthony Richardson to this point, I think I told you, Eddie, 2 nights ago I went and saw the Bob Dylan movie. The Bob Dylan movie reflects on the early first 3 to 4 years of Bob Dylan's career as a singer-songwriter and the moment that defined that, the transcendent moment that defined Bob Dylan as a singer-songwriter. There was something that took place that now, 60 years later, when people talk about Bob Dylan in the first 5 years of his legendary career, there's a defining moment that is discussed. I'm not going to say because it would give away the movie, but it's discussed in the movie. And in the moment that it happened, people were aware of it, but nobody knew that it would be discussed 60 years later. Now, in the career of Anthony Richardson, we don't know whether or not Anthony Richardson and his career, the times are changing for the Colts, right? And we don't know whether or not Anthony Richardson just is this career that's just blowing in the wind or he's going to be around for a while, okay? But if he is going to have a legendary career, is it possible still that one of the defining moments that's talked about is what happened this season in 2 chapters? One of them is the tap out. Where he goes from here is probably going to go a long way in determining whether or not Anthony Richardson's career is still remembered for when he tapped himself on the helmet, and then when asked about it after the game, said, look, I was tired. I'm not going to lie to you. I had to catch my breath. And then he gets benched. I don't need to rehash that for everybody here. Everybody knows the story. Is it possible that what we have now before us, somebody just pointed this out to me, I think it's an outstanding point. Can Anthony Richardson erase that moment? Can Anthony Richardson have his watershed moment of getting the water going back in the right direction by simply sometime today or tomorrow saying, I'm playing? I know that I'm banged up and I know that I couldn't practice this week, but I am going to play. I'm going to be there for my teammates. I'm going to be there for my fans, and I'm going to be there for me because I'm a professional, and nothing's going to stop me from being out there with my guys because we have to win this game, and I'm confident that I can go in there and win. I see that field. I see that stadium. I think about the fourth quarter comeback against the Jets. I'm the guy. I'm the leader, and I'm the leader of this team. So even though I'm not 100%, I am playing. I'm going to be out there. If he does that, if he says that, if he comes out, could this be, in fact, his moment that then, like Jonathan Taylor, coming a week after pulling a Leon Lett and running into the tunnel holding the football and saying, like, look, I'm putting that behind me now. Is this his opportunity to do that? We'll see. Maybe it is. I mean, maybe that would help him. But either way, not practicing today, and we will keep our eyes on what does happen from there. The other thing, Eddie, you watched last night.
Yeah.
And you're watching Seattle, who is, just kind of there, right? And you're watching the Bears. The terrible, hapless, clueless, directionless, toothless Bears. I mean, that franchise, Caleb Williams has no time. They have done nothing to help him. Nothing. He has no assistance around him. He has no protection. He's running for his life. He looks rattled. He looks confused. From the top down, that franchise is a complete and total disgrace. And yet, they might not be the worst team in the National Football League.
Yeah.
That's the worst team in the National Football League may well be the one that the Colts are going to see on Sunday.
Oh, that's without question.
They're terrible.
Can you name 3 players? Not named Tyrone Tracy?
Boy. Drew Lock.
Okay.
Is Wayne Gallman still there?
No.
He's probably been gone for 3 years. Amani Toomer, is he still there? Plaxico Burress, is he gone? I mean, it's rough, right?
Yeah.
And yet,
there is a Hoosier on their team, by the way.
You mean a Hoosier as in an Indiana native or a former Indiana star?
Former Indiana footballer.
Lineman, right?
Linebacker.
Go ahead.
Micah McFadden.
Okay. I mean, look.
And Bobby Okereke.
I did know Bobby Okereke, yeah. But, if you look at their season, I mean, what have they lost now? 10 straight? Something like that?
Sure.
And I mean, you lose by a field goal to New Orleans. Okay, congratulations. You get a participation trophy. They have not been in games. And they are, if you're New York, I mean, and we'll find out. I mean, we're going to go out and take a road trip out to New York later today, and we'll find out what the mindset is from the Giants. I mean, sometimes you get teams, Eddie, that are struggling like this, and they're ready to try to prove something, finish strong. Guys are invested. They're fighting for their jobs, whatever. More often than not, though, you get to this point, and players literally like, just get this over with, man. Just get it over with, right? They're terrible.
They're ready for Cancun.
They're already in Cancun. They're all flying back on JetBlue Sunday afternoon and getting to the stadium like at 12:30, and they're like, all right, let's go. Let's play the game. Terrible, right? Last night, Pacers at the Fieldhouse. I'll tell you what. Oklahoma City, we talked about this yesterday. Oklahoma City's pretty fascinating because for years, they had like 18 first-round picks stored up. I mean, it was incredible the number of players that they had, stockpiled, draft capital, all of that, right? And you knew, and I think probably who would you say is their second most famous player on their roster? I didn't say active, but their second most famous player on their roster.
Chet Holmgren?
Yes. And yet he's out and has been out, but he's a good player.
Broken pelvis, I think, or fractured pelvis or something like that.
I mean, he's a good player, right?
Poor guy.
But they have on that roster two things going for them. Number one, they've done a really good job with that team of putting together. It's one thing to know talent. It's another to know how to kind of mesh it. And they have guys that play really well together. Hartenstein, for example, is the perfect guy for that team because, what's his job? Keep loose balls alive, get rebounds, kick it back out, occasionally score on the low post. Does it really well. Really good passer out of the low post, which facilitates for their guards and their wing players. And then you have, I'll tell you another guy, and you talked about him yesterday, who's a really good player for them. Jalen Williams is a really good player.
Yes, very good.
He looks like he has the body type of like a midday manager at Best Buy.
I was going to say a tight end.
He does not look like an NBA player, but just a very smart player and, good shooter. They have good shooters all over the floor. They space really well, and they have good shooters all over the floor. But so much of that is facilitated by the guy last night that we saw, I believe had a career high, 45, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander.
Tied a season high.
Midway through the fourth quarter, Stephen Holder looks at me and goes, he's going to go for 40. I'm like, well, yeah, he's got 36 right now. And he hit a shot, and the Pacers were not to blame here. They guarded and defended well, but got right in his face, and he hits a pull-up three that kind of sealed it.
Yep.
The Pacers controlled that game throughout until the last, essentially, 5 minutes of the game, and Oklahoma City did something in that game that Indiana can learn from. And there was a recipe before them that I think the Pacers can learn from just in terms of the way Oklahoma City plays and the way that they are constructed. And we'll get into that further in about 20 minutes. But I thought Oak City was very impressive, and it was one of those games for Indiana that is definitely disappointing and one that you look back and you go, man, they really should have had that because it was there. But I think it's still encouraging. And I know that there are no moral victories at the professional level, but if you look at where the Pacers have been, 3 weeks ago to now, they looked really, really good until late in that game. And, again, the mystery of kind of the disappearance of Tyrese Halliburton not being offensively aggressive enough. And we talked yesterday about how with Nembhard there, the thing that it allows Halliburton to do is to facilitate and not have to be the nonstop scoring threat. Last night, he didn't have to be a nonstop scoring threat, but simply some scoring at all would have been good from him because they wasted a really good night from Nembhard. But Halliburton, late in the game, I think that even the team was looking for when he was going to kind of turn it on, and it just never came. And I know that maybe it's unfair to point that out and put it on him, but when you're a max contract guy, that's the reality of where the expectations are. But we'll get into that later on in the program. One thing that's interesting about the game of football, the NFL, and over the holidays is there's kind of an area that we've forgotten about, and that's just the regular bowl games. Are the bowl games becoming victimized to the college football playoff and the expanded playoffs? Maybe, because the playoffs are a topic of conversation. In fact, our next guest from South Bend, Tom Noy, going to join us to talk about exactly that, the Irish getting set for Georgia. He's going to join us on the other side. A reminder, you still got a week left. If you are a member of a monthly car wash program, between now and the end of the year, you've got, just under a week left to get into Jiffy Lube. Get $20 off signature service, oil change, and a free tire rotation simply by pointing to the Jiffy Lube team member and saying, look, I take care of the outside of my car. I know you guys are going to help me with the underbody and with the tires, and that's exactly what they'll do. $20 off that signature service, oil change, and a free tire rotation simply because you are a part of a monthly car wash program, regardless of what car wash you're talking about, at all of the Central Indiana Jiffy Lubes that's available for you. Jiffy Lube, of course, is your one-stop shopping for all your maintenance needs, and you never need an appointment. Tom Noy has an appointment, South Bend Tribune. He's going to join us next. Notre Dame is not going down to Georgia, but they're going down to take them on, obviously, at the Sugar Bowl in New Orleans. It is one of the college football playoff games. I do feel bad for Oklahoma, Navy, Georgia Tech, Vanderbilt, Texas Tech, Arkansas, Syracuse, Washington State, Texas A&M, USC, UConn, North Carolina, Boston College, Nebraska, Louisiana, TCU, Iowa State, Miami, et cetera, et cetera. Why, you ask? Because those are all teams that have bowl games taking place over the course of the weekend. And I do enjoy bowl season, but the expanded college football playoff and the increased number of games and rounds of it, it does feel like it has made all bowl games, not including Pop-Tarts, like almost invisible. You just don't hear nor talk about them because there is so much attention, understandably and rightly so, on what's going to be taking place in these games. Joining us now in the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line, a guy that's become almost a pseudo member of the company, as a matter of fact, Tom Noy from the South Bend Tribune, to talk about the Irish and their matchup with Georgia. Tom, first off, happy holidays. Appreciate the time. I know it's a busy time. Let's get right to this, and that is, let's recap first off just the Indiana game in general. You know, I thought that was one of those that you had kind of predicted going into it. I think that you thought Notre Dame's focus was where, you know, was pretty locked in. It appeared that way. Did Indiana also fall victim a little bit to Curt Cignetti, like going one too many times to the well with the IU hype train?
Oh, absolutely. And if you're going to hype it up the way Curt Cignetti hyped it up, even in the hours before the game on game day, and saying what he said about beating top 25 teams, guess what? You better freaking back it up. And when Curtis Rourke threw that pick from that Xavier Watts got, and Jeremiah Love went 98 yards on the second play, or the first play after that, you're basically like, all right, time to start playing for New Orleans. I mean, it was an absolute no-show all the way around by Indiana. And Curt Cignetti, like, yeah, that's great. We understand that you won and you were successful at other stops, but this is really big boy football, and he didn't wear his big boy pants on Friday night.
Yeah, I thought, Tom, one of the things that, and you tell me if you agree with this, and I think Curt Cignetti's a really good football coach, and I think he was exactly what Indiana needed at the time that he was hired, and still is, you know, is going to do good things at Indiana. And I don't think Indiana fans would want to trade him for the world. Having said that, I think that he enjoyed the bravado of what was necessary. I think he kind of put on an act right in the beginning of the, you know, Google me and that kind of thing to try to assure a fan base, look, I've got this. I've got this under control. I think where he erred was right before the game when he went on game day. He looked over and he thought he was in the bro lounge one too many times, and he wasn't. At that point, he was on a professional broadcast stage, and he confused what show he was on and picked the wrong character. Is that too harsh?
No, and it's absolutely 200% correct. Like, he wanted to go back and be that guy that said Purdue sucks and Ohio State sucks, and wait a minute. You got a kickoff of a college football playoff game here in like 3 hours. So, yeah, and again, that's not taking anything away from Curt Cignetti or anything away from Indiana, but it was a different level last Friday night at Notre Dame Stadium, and one team was prepared to play at that level and one wasn't.
How has Marcus Freeman, in his role as a head coach, in a position where he also, Tom, has kind of had to learn on the job, how has he matured?
I think he can better understand what it takes as a head coach to reach his players. Like, he was all over the map the first year, and rightfully so, because he had never done it. He was kind of all over the map the second year, and rightfully so, because he had never gone through a second season. But I think in his third season, he's been able to be a little bit more level-headed, a little bit more fiery when he needs to be fiery, not being the rah-rah guy that he was when he walked through the locker room door that December day when he was officially introduced as head coach, but being more of a head coach, like taking a 35,000-foot view of what the job entails and being like, I can't worry about perception. He was so worried about outside appearances and how it was going to play on the outside of Notre Dame, I think, the first 2 years, whereas this year he's just like, look, I got to get locked in with my guys. I got to get my guys all on the same page. I got to get them moving in the right direction. And whatever they're saying outside, whatever they're saying over there or over here, let them say it, because we've got a job to do, and let's go do that job. And for 11 weeks now, they've been able to do that.
Tom, with Georgia being up next, Tom Noyes, our guest on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line from the South Bend Tribune. Georgia up next for Notre Dame now. And, from the outside, there's kind of that mystery of not knowing from Georgia's standpoint, kind of twofold. Number one, which Georgia you're going to get, and number two, which quarterback you're going to get. How big a juggling act has all of that been for the Irish getting prepared?
I don't think it's juggling whatsoever. I think when it's going to be Gunnar Stockton. And if you want to put Gunnar Stockton up against an Al Golden defense with all that talent, I know they're missing Riley Mills. He's the latest guy to go down, and that's another blow. But this team has been able to roll with all those changes that they've had where they're losing this guy. Now, all the key guys that they couldn't lose, they've lost this year. So then they lose Riley Mills, another one. But you're going up against Gunnar Stockton. You're going up against a backup quarterback, and that backup quarterback's going to have to play against one of the best defenses in the country, where they're seventh in total defense and seventh in rush defense and sixth in scoring defense. I'm putting my money on Notre Dame's defense, except for the fact that whoever's going to play quarterback for Georgia, like this Notre Dame defense is going to be ready.
Does that change in any way the offensive game plan and the fact that, when you look at Indiana's offense, for example, the one thing that you looked at with Indiana is you said, okay, they do have an offense that if Rourke can get going, and obviously they were never able to, but you wanted to kind of keep the ball away from Indiana's offense to not allow them to get in rhythm. If Georgia is going with a bit of a handcuffed offense, does it change in any way, shape, or form Notre Dame's game plan of less ball control and more open-ended, if that makes sense?
I think they're going to open it up a lot more than what they showed against Indiana. Indiana, for everything that Notre Dame did and jump into that 27-3 lead, they kind of played it close to the vest, kind of vanilla, kind of dumbed it down a little bit. I don't know if they're going to do that with against Georgia. Like, let's turn Jeremiah Love loose. Let's turn Riley Leonard loose. I think Riley Leonard was kind of real bland and really not what he had been the last 4 or 5 weeks of the regular season against Indiana. They're kind of saving that. They're holding that back against Georgia. This is a program that won back-to-back national championships not long ago. So you just throw everything out there, and then if you happen to advance and get to the Orange Bowl the following week, then you just recalibrate and see what needs to be done against whoever comes out on the other side of the bracket.
Tom, I'll just be transparent here. I've said it on the show many times. I grew up in Indiana, right? I grew up an Indiana basketball fan. I was an Indiana football fan, but it was pretty lean, right? And then I was a Clemson football fan. I've never liked Notre Dame. Just haven't liked them. For whatever reason, this year, going into it, I looked at it and said, you know what, Jake, you probably need to just go ahead and accept and like Notre Dame because they may be one of the 3 best teams in the country, maybe 4. And we've talked about this before, Tom. It almost seems to their advantage that when they lost that Northern Illinois game, they just went completely off the radar and were able to go in their own lab, and nobody really checked on them every 9 weeks to monitor their grade. And then they come out and it's like, wow, they're ready for the final. Is this a top 3 team? I mean, obviously they're a top, whatever it is, 8 team left, but are they a legitimate contender here to win the whole thing?
I have said, I don't know, I think it might have been somewhere around the Virginia or Florida State, somewhere in early November. I said there are 3 really good teams in college football right now: Oregon, Ohio State, and Notre Dame. And I do think that just the way this team is constructed, the way it's been through the NIU disaster, the way it's bounced back, they're built differently. They're built to handle what they're going to have to handle on the floor of the Superdome on New Year's Eve or New Year's Day night, and to get out of there. It would be like it would be fascinating to see Notre Dame get to a semifinal, but it also would be kind of disappointing if they didn't, because if there's any program that was built to do this right now, it's this one, given the personnel, given where they are, given what they've been through. Like you said, everybody in the Big Ten just beat each other up. Everybody in the SEC just beat each other up. Notre Dame just kind of sat there and was like, okay, we're just going to get better. And that's what they've done.
And by the way, if you're Oregon or Ohio State or Texas for that matter, and I don't know anything about Arizona State, but if you're one of those teams up at the top bracket, don't you have to be saying to yourself, like, what did we do to deserve this? And I mean that as no disrespect to Notre Dame, Georgia, Penn State, or Boise State. But when you look at it on paper, doesn't it look like it's a far more arduous path for Oregon, who's supposedly number 1?
What's Oregon's reward for going through the season undefeated? You have to play Ohio State again,
right?
Who you already beat, and then you might have to go to Texas to play Texas.
It is crazy, isn't it?
The national championship.
Yeah,
game.
you're right,
It's
because
crazy.
they'd have to play in the Cotton Bowl to play Texas, right?
Right. They're playing a de facto home game. Austin's a couple hours south of Dallas, so it's like Oregon's looking at it and like, wait, tell us how this works out for us again.
It is. I mean, it is honestly, and and the two wild cards in the whole thing. Let's be real, just because we don't see them as often. At least I don't. I think Boise State's probably really good. Any team to get to this point obviously has done their work, right? Arizona State, I was saying, Tom, the greatest thing of all would be if Arizona State just wins this whole thing, because it's like, wait, what? It's like 83 NC State college basketball. Like, where did this come from? It'd be kind of cool.
It would be. Like they would literally come from nowhere. They were picked to finish last in their league, and now they're going to be playing in a quarterfinal of the CFP. Go make sense of that.
Well, I'll tell you what, have fun down there. There are worse places that you could be for New Year's than down getting ready to take in the Sugar Bowl. So certainly enjoy it, but I know there's work to do, and I appreciate the time as always. Look forward to talking to you again.
You got it, brother. Have a good New Year's.
You too. Tom Noy on the South Bend Tribune on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line. Yeah, man, that top bracket, Oregon, Ohio State, just got to be thinking. And I'll bet you, I hate saying it, I think Ohio State, I hate saying they're going to beat Oregon, but they might.
Should they be considered the favorite to win it all?
Ohio State?
Right now?
I think they are. I think the winner of that game is, right? Ohio State or Oregon. Last night, speaking of favorites, one of the favorites to make a deep run in the NBA, it's very early, obviously, but clearly one of the best teams in the league, might have given a lesson to the Pacers last night in something that we can look at and learn from. I'll tell you what next. Now, I always get confused whether this is Kansas or Blue Oyster Cult. Blue Oyster Cult, of course, the tickets that Jefferson has to get for, or that Damone has to get for, no, I'm sorry, he has to get, who does he need to get for Jefferson? Earth, Wind, and Fire. But the two kids come up looking for Blue Oyster Cult, but this is Kansas, correct?
No.
Oh, this is Styx.
There you go. I know you get there eventually.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Were you up all night again? Is that why you were
was actually. I was up till 2:30. Not bad.
I'd say you're not as sharp today as normal.
For whatever reason, that song, I do like Styx, though. But Styx, Cheap Trick, and there's one other one that are all from Illinois in the same era. But I'm pretty sure Styx is from Illinois. Either way, last night, Oklahoma City in the field house, and that was a really good game. And as I was watching it, I was thinking to myself, okay, Oklahoma City is a team that, and I realized that a year ago probably you could say that they fell short of what was expected of them. I think that we thought this is the arrival of something that for a couple of years we have anticipated because they have accumulated a really good roster. And there's, as I alluded to this earlier, it's one thing to go to the grocery store and get great groceries. It's another to figure out how to put them together into a great meal. And Oklahoma City had plenty of cracks and plenty of trips to the grocery store to put together good talent. But the way that team moves the ball around and anticipates one another, they do it as well as anybody in the NBA. And I think that the Pacers can probably learn a little from that because Indiana does it really well, and the Pacers did it really well last night, in particular in the first half, right out of the get-go. And what was interesting was when they got out to the 10-point lead, the Pacers did, with Pascal Siakam being a key part of it. He hit a trio of threes early. He was the guy that was their go-to guy early in that game. But what Siakam did was he was scoring within the flow of their offense at fast pace. So he wasn't Siakam's points early when Indiana was doing what they needed to get to that lead. They were moving the ball and scoring it with rotation and not over-dribbling and killing down shot clocks, and they were scoring in fast possessions, and Siakam was a part of that. And that, at one point, Siakam hit a bank three and kind of gave it the look like, yeah, okay. I mean, that was
the MJ shrug.
What's that?
The MJ shrug.
He did do essentially the MJ shrug, right? Of like, yeah, I'm feeling it at this point. But as the game went on, I thought the Pacers got away from it a little bit. Each time Oklahoma City would make a run, though, the Pacers would pick their pace back up and were able to maintain like a 3 to 7 point cushion. But the Thunder, late in the game, had something that Indiana did not. And I know that he's an elite level player. And it's one thing to be a guy. I go back to the Ahmad Rashad Winning Time documentary when he said, everybody knows that guy on the playground that is like, no, winning time, like the ball's going to come to my hands, 3, 2, 1, I'm putting that shot up. And Ahmad Rashad said, everybody knows that shot's not going in. But there are certain guys that that shot is going in. Now, Tyrese Halliburton has had stretches where when he gets the basketball, everybody in the arena knows he's putting up like a 35-footer, and it's not always, it's kind of an unorthodox look, but more often than not, it goes in, and a lot of that is facilitated by the fact that Tyrese Halliburton, more than anybody else, feels it's going in. Then there are times where Halliburton actually looks like he's not totally sure that it's going in. They brought out two guys last night at one of the quarter breaks that had to shoot three-pointers against one another. And both of them, you could tell, were guys that probably played some basketball. They didn't have terrible form. They looked okay. One hit 1 3 and the other hit none, like in 45 seconds. But it's bright lights. You're in that arena. Your depth is off. You know that you got a chance to win. Hoosier Lotto tickets or whatever it might be, and so you're a little bit nervous. And as guys start shooting it, you can tell then they're overthinking their way through the shot. Halliburton at times looks like he's overthinking his way through his shot. And he's at his best when he's playing at pace and when he's not stopping to think and square up on that shot. Odd as that sounds, that's when he's at his best. What Oklahoma City did last night was they never bailed on their bread and butter. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, throughout the course of that game, he never unfelt his rhythm. But they allowed other guys to draw off of him and give him spells, so to speak, with outstanding ball movement. But what they did late in that game was when it mattered, they went to him and made it very clear and made it very known, he is the guy. Well, you are the guy that we rode here, and you're the guy that we are going to ride in. You're either going to shoot us to a win or you're going to shoot us out of this game. And he hit big shots down the stretch.
He missed one shot after the first quarter.
Yeah, I mean, and those were, in defense of the Pacers, many of those were defended shots. I mean, it's not like he was just wide open. But Oklahoma City kept going to him, letting him know he was the guy. And I think the Pacers at times last night, Halliburton, it wasn't that they weren't going to him. He just wasn't aggressive enough down the stretch. The Pacers, the last thing they need to do, and they had it a year ago. I think now the thing that's missing for Indiana is this, and that is they need to establish who the absolute everybody in the arena knows who's getting the ball late in the game. We know it's Halliburton, but he has to want that night in and night out. And if he doesn't, they have to kind of let him know, no, that's what we're looking to you for. And I thought last night they got away from that a little bit. Nembhard had a really good game, but when it came down to it, you got to ride your star. And Oklahoma City had one they went to, and Indiana did not last night. Now, the other thing I noticed about the game, we're sitting there, and I say to Stephen Holder, who I went to the game with, and I said, Stephen.
Now, did you go with him or did he go with you?
He drove, so I guess I went with him, right?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. He picked me up. I live on the way. And so Stephen's sitting to my left, and then Shannon's friend Susie is sitting to my right. And I say this to Stephen. I said, I'm going to make an observation that once I say it to you, you're either going to totally disagree and never see it, or you're going to agree with me and never unsee it. And he said, your brain is a fascinating place. I'm a little worried. And I said, here's my observation. And Stephen Holder chuckles and says, not only can I see it, I think you're right. I'm never going to unsee that. And so Susie says, what are you talking about? And so I say it to Susie. And she says, oh, my. You don't even have to give the disclaimer. Wow. Yes. So the guy behind us is like, what are you guys talking about? And I said, well, let me give you an observation. And I share it with him, and he says, holy cow. And then I hear him say to his buddy, did you hear what he just said? Look at this. Once I point this out to you and you see it, you're never going to unsee it. It's like one of those magic eye 3D images. And now everybody around, and so for 9 times out of 10 when I shoot these shots, I'm airballing. But in this case, apparently I hit a shot because everybody around me is saying truer words have never been spoken.
You know, Jake, I think I even heard Mark Boyle mention it during the broadcast last night after
it made its way around. Because if I would have told him this observation, it might have been like the wave, and it got to him, and he's like, I can never unsee it. And when I tell it to you, it's going to go one of two ways. But I'm betting that a lot of people are going to tonight at dinner say, you know what, I heard something today, and I looked it up, and you're not going to believe this. And we'll actually ask our friend from the Indianapolis Star, Dustin
Dopirak,
if he heard about it last night as well. I'll tell you what it is. So last night, I finally vocalized what I have noticed forever. And when I point this out, you are either going to say, this dude is the weirdest guy ever and I have no idea what he's talking about, or you're going to say, yeah.
Do I need to
Holy
have
cow.
the brain dropping on
Not a
loop
brain
ready?
dropping. Here's what I need you to do.
Okay.
I need you, Eddie Garrison, to pull up, and for anybody that's listening right now that's near a computer, I guess, pull up an image of the Statue of Liberty. The Statue of Liberty in, obviously, New York City, okay? I don't think I need to explain to people the Statue of Liberty. If you look at the side profile of the Statue of Liberty, and this is not meant as a knock, strictly an observation. The side profile of the Statue of Liberty, and in particular the contour of the nose of the Statue of Liberty, which, by the way, is a female. It is believed that it was designed after a woman that was believed to be one of the most beautiful women in the world in France at the time of its, being constructed. But nonetheless, it's rather, it's, I don't know by looking at it that you can tell necessarily, even though it's referred to as she, but the side profile of the Statue of Liberty, are you looking at it, Eddie? The side profile looks extremely similar.
Side.
The nose itself looks remarkably like Oklahoma City center Isaiah Hartenstein. When you look at the side of his face and the profile structure of his face, it's like he looks exactly like the Statue of Liberty.
You can see it a little bit. Yeah, I can see
Can't
it a little bit. A little bit, yeah.
Yeah. Like once you see it, you'll never unsee it.
But then again, I'm not often,
Maybe it's the eye, like the eye socket and nose combination. But I'm telling you, last night I made that observation. And then at one point, he was stretching his arm out, and he had his right arm held out and his left arm like tucked in. And I thought, holy cow, he's doing everything but a tablet and a torch. And everybody around me, maybe they were just humoring me. That's entirely possible. That happens from time to time when my brain droppings just hit such that people are like, what in the world is going on around me? And I look over and they're wearing galoshes. Joining us now, and I'm sure thrilled to be doing so based on that, is on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line, the Pacers beat writer from the Indianapolis Star, Dustin
Dopirak,
who joins us. Dustin, first, let's begin with, have you ever noticed, by the way, that Isaiah Hartenstein looks kind of like the Statue of Liberty?
I am putting this together as you're talking. I'm not there yet. I might get there. I might convince myself of this.
Are you looking at pictures of either one of them?
I'm looking at both. I've called both up on my computer, and I have to maybe get them a little bit closer. The Statue of Liberty's nose is pretty severe now that I notice it. It's very
and it's very straight. Like there's no bridge in it, nor no uptick. Right? It's very angular. It's very angular.
Yes, it's a very angular nose, and he does have a very angular nose. So I will grant at least. I will at least grant that. Now I'm looking kind of a head, cocked to the side situation.
He also his hair last night looked kind of like a crown, the way it swoops upwards. I'm just telling you. Once you see
that, I missed.
Listen, it's like those magic eye things. Once you see it, Dustin, you're going to go, oh, "Holy cow!"
There it is. I can't get away from it. That's fair. I'm trying to get there. So
I appreciate you working with me.
But I'm working on it.
Jake, I want to throw this in here real quick. Dustin was multitasking. He had to listen to you talk about how Isaiah Hartenstein and the Statue of Liberty are similar while he was breaking news.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I wasn't breaking any news. No, it's been on the injury report for like half an hour.
Well, nonetheless, let's go ahead and hit the breaking news sounder. It's breaking news for this radio audience, Dustin, so we'll play the sounder. All right, go ahead with your news, Dustin.
Yeah, Obi's out. Obi's out for tonight, which you probably knew, which basically Carroll more or less said. But they had to, they filed the injury report they got to file it by 1:00, the day of the second day of a back-to-back, and so he's listed as out. That's official.
And that is
official for like half an hour, so like I didn't break it anybody at all. But yes, that's still news if you haven't seen the injury report yet.
When he left the game last night, Obi Toppin, and it was a ankle injury, right? When he left the game, am I hallucinating? I was thinking that at one point he came back and there was a brief moment where it looked like he might return to the game.
Well, he did return to the game.
That's right.
He came back. He came back in the second quarter. I think he came out in the first, looked pretty rough. James Johnson carried him off, but he came back onto the bench in the second quarter, played a little bit in the second quarter. I'm not sure how many minutes he was in there. I mean, he didn't look like he was moving great, but I mean, it's one of those things where even if he can run around on it at all, you're like, okay, well, it can't be that bad.
Well, yeah, but a lot of times it's as soon as you stop, right?
Sure, yeah, and that makes it worse. So it's like that doesn't mean he won't miss a couple with this one, but basically, I guess he got back to halftime, and I think I'm trying to think what Rick's phrasing for it was that he was feeling it at that point, I guess is the best way to put it. And so basically, he said, after he said he couldn't go on, and basically after the game last night, he said, he's probably not going to be able to play in this one. He played 4 minutes in the second quarter, so that's how much he could do on that ankle at that point. So yeah, to your point, it probably did get worse overnight.
I thought the return of Andrew Nimhard, and in particular on the road, the wins on the road and the win streak, that one of the things the Pacers did really well was their pacing was faster. Their half-court sets were much quicker. Pascal Siakam, for that matter, I thought last night at the beginning of the game that was the case.
Sure.
But yet Halliburton seems to lack, in particular at home, that late-game offensive aggressiveness that we've seen from the past, and he is facilitating but not getting shot aggressive. Does he need to go back to being more shot aggressive?
Yeah, I mean, I think last night was more driven by who was guarding him. I mean, at least that's the impression that Rick Carlisle seemed to get. Obviously he was being guarded by Lou Dort, and Lou Dort's one of the best 3 or 4 perimeter defenders in the league. But you still got to get more than 6 shots. And he didn't shoot it all in the last 340. Your guy's got to go get shots at some point. I understand he's dealing with a really good defender, but you mentioned Nemhard. Shea Gilgeous-Alexander was being guarded by a really good defender, and he still got 45 out of the night. So you got to be able to get something a little bit more. I think it was the buckets he did get, were good signs. I mean, it was 2 downhill floaters, and you're like, okay, you could probably do more of that. Not that it's easy to get to your floater against Dort, but at some point that's probably going to be there, and there should be some opportunities. And he missed the only 2 threes he took. He seemed like he passed up on some stuff. There was an opportunity, I think, for more aggression. I understand the concept of saying, well, when you're being defended by a guy that's if you're a point guard and you're a distributor guy first, and you're being defended by one of the best defenders in the league, it's not a bad idea to give everybody else the opportunity to go score, and everybody else did go score. All the other 4 starters were in double figures. Nemhard gets 23, basically takes advantage of his matchups. Siakam was really good with 22. But, you can do more than 6 shots without being overly, I guess overly selfish in terms of looking for your own or getting out of the way of everybody else. There still should have been more. I mean, there's got to be more, I think, on a night. When you're scoring 4 points and their all-star is scoring 45, that gap's just a little bit too big.
Dustin Dopirak is our guest from the Indianapolis Star and the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest line. Dustin, let's go back to something we talked a lot about yesterday, and we probably will continue to talk day-to-day about it until it happens, and that is the latest timetable for Aaron Nesmith. We now know Obi Toppin is out. Nesmith is starting to work out a little bit, I think, in 3-on-3 drills. His return would be targeted around when?
That's a great question, because I would think he'd be back by now. I think so. I don't know. I mean, basically, I haven't. The last time I asked Rick was Sacramento. In the basically before the practice there, he said it wasn't imminent. I saw him, running around in a red jersey. So he's at least done something, but not totally sure. So obviously it wasn't available last night, not available again tonight. You would have to think it's got to be coming soon. Maybe if it's not before New Year's, at least shortly after. You're looking at 6 weeks on an ankle, and he's been doing stuff. So I'll bother Rick again about it today and see if he's got a better sense. But as of 1 week ago, it was still not imminent. And he basically told me at that point there wasn't a chance he was going to be playing on this trip. So it can't be too far in the distance. I'd be surprised if it's another full week. But I mean, I guess I don't know. This thing has been dragging around along longer than I would have thought. And again, we saw him on the floor, doing shooting drills, 2-3 weeks ago. So you would think they're further along than they are.
I thought last night Jarris Walker gave him pretty good minutes. He had a couple of key moments that were, flashes. What is it going to take to start seeing that more consistently? And is he running out of time with Neesmith coming back? And then, maybe Toppin buys him a little more time. But if Toppin and Neesmith are both healthy, does that limit now the amount of time Jarris Walker is going to get to show consistency?
Yeah, I mean, you would think so. I mean, obviously, you got to figure out. Shepard, I think, is the more established player at this point. Still, I mean, even after Walker had all that time where Shepard was on the shelf, they still seem to trust Shepard more. He just does the basic things well. He's a more solid defender. Walker obviously gives you a little more size, and he's certainly better able to kind of create some turnovers and some havoc, but he just hasn't been as reliable as just a wall you up kind of guy. And Shepard gives you exactly what you ask for on offense, which is run the corner, move the basketball. Walker's got more potential. There's more things that he can do, but he's not quite as reliable of a shooter. He's not quite as reliable of a ball mover. He'd be probably better if basically you had to judge each of them by having to be more of a creator. Walker's better in that, but that's not necessary basically in his offensive role with this. I think he is running out of time a little bit to make an impact. I don't think he's going to find himself cut out completely when Neesmith comes out, but he is going to have a harder time getting minutes. Basically, again, to your point, if Obi misses a couple weeks, that's probably a couple more weeks for Walker gets to play. I guess in that way he takes on what was his more traditional role, which is playing the four, what he was basically drafted for. But obviously he's been, I think, fine as far as from just doing the job positionally standpoint at the three. I think he is in a situation where it is going to be tough for him to find minutes. So every opportunity he still has, he's got to make the most of.
Has Indiana improved their defense in the last month to 6 weeks? Have they tweaked things defensively?
In the sense that they got their guys back. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing. I can't sense a schematic tweak, but it makes just a huge difference that they have Andrew Nembhard. Like for the previous up until Nembhard was back, Quentin Jackson was guarding the opposition's best player. They had a two-way contract guy guarding the opposition's best player, and that's at the end of the day not good. Personnel still matters. I mean, for as much as those three guys aren't big, huge scorers when it comes to Nembhard, Neesmith, and Shepard. They were their top three perimeter defenders. I mean, basically, you throw McConnell in there as well as one of the top four, but McConnell obviously is kind of limited by size as to who he can defend. He's as good as any of them as being an on-ball guard and just getting after you. I think Nembhard, he wasn't necessarily great last night, and Gilgeous-Alexander was phenomenal. But I mean, he more or less shut out Steph Curry, on Monday nights. I mean, he's been excellent. Basically, I mean, Nembhard's been terrific, and just having somebody like that at the point of attack makes a huge difference. Miles Turner, I think, has had a really good stretch of rim protection and rebounding, and so I think it's more just getting the personnel back more than anything else. And again, there might be schematic tweaks that are. I don't know if they're too small for me to notice. I just don't notice them. But I think it's just the biggest part is just having the guys available that you can trust to defend top players.
By the way, Eddie, did you feel a slight breeze just a second ago?
I thought I felt a draft.
Moving into the studio. I believe we have a guest that just joined here in the studio, right? I don't know. Dustin, are you familiar with our friend Robin the Genie that makes an appearance from time to time?
I am not familiar with this.
Well, every once in a while I'll crack open a bottle of Diet Mountain Dew, PBRs if I'm at home, but and out will pop Robin the Genie. And a lot of times he has questions for our guests,
Sure.
And he usually offers very large prizes of money if your answer is correct. Robin, would you like to? Yes, hello, Dustin. I am Robin the Genie with a question for you. No, Robin usually has very insightful questions. He pays very close attention. That is correct.
Is he French? What is his accent?
I am French like my sister, the Statue of Liberty, who looks much like that fella for the Oklahoma City Thunder. Yeah, okay. So yes, Robin is French. Robin, did you have a question for Dustin? I did. Dustin, I'm going to ask you a question. You're going to write down an answer, and in 1 year, we will open the envelope of your answer, and if it is correct, you will win $1 million. Now, Dustin, I can tell you this. Robin, his track record of actually payout, not strong, but nonetheless.
Not great.
Robin, what is your question for Dustin? Dustin, I would like to know. We are going to open an envelope 1 year from now and ask this question for you. In 1 year, will Miles Turner be an Indiana Pacer? I would like to know your answer. There you go, Dustin. Yes or no, I guess. Is Miles Turner going to be here in a year?
I'm going to say yes.
Okay.
I'm going to go with yes. Reason being, it's going to be hard to find a better center. In terms of, I don't know who all is going to be available for agent wise, but I don't know that there's a better one that fits. I imagine they'll have to give him a raise, and that will be tough, and that will make things tighter financially than they already are. But I think they'll do good enough this year to not necessarily run it back completely, but not feel like they're ready to make that change. It's possible that it'll be a short-ish term deal where they're not going to go the full 4 years or full 5 years on a contract, but maybe do 2 again, where they have to revisit this in a couple more years. But my guess is yes, I think they'll get enough done this year to want to keep him. I think they want to keep him. I think he wants to stay. Obviously, I think there's a lot of people who look around and say, well, there are better centers in the league, but yet there are better centers in the league, but I don't know if there are better centers that you can get. And so, if they can get him for $25 million a year, if they can keep it south of 30, or maybe even get it at 30, I think they'll try to do it. It seems like they want to. I think the only reason that they wouldn't is if this goes really south. If basically they go back to what they were doing last month, and put together 10 to 15 stretches and they end up, well out of the playoff picture, then they let him walk and they, change direction.
It also feels to me, Dustin, like Miles Turner, who I think is a really good player. I mean, I think he's an underappreciated player here by fans. I don't mean by the organization, but nonetheless, what he brings to the table works better in Indiana. In other words, I think he might have more value in Indiana than he would in most places because the style that he plays is somewhat unique, and therefore his skill set doesn't necessarily immediately fit in with the style of play of other teams just generically across the board. Would you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, his offensive game really fits Halliburton well. I think it's as good as obviously if you put him with like top Embiid operating at his highest level, I mean that might be different because you're talking about an MVP caliber player. Certainly that's not what Embiid's been yet. But there are other guys in the league that could fit better, but those guys aren't for sale. Basically like Joker's not for sale, So I think, but yeah, I mean, he is uniquely suited, I think, to play with Halliburton. I think their pick and roll combination is obviously very, very good. Whether he's rolling, I think his mid-range game fits really well. Obviously, he's able to pop out and hit threes. Just all the things he can do in a pick and roll scenario fit really well. And then you can he can go space when Halliburton and Siakam are running pick and roll. So I think that in itself is really, really valuable. Like that's not easy to replace. And when he's blocking shots, like his wasn't blocking at his higher rate, but I think he had 5 last night. He's rebounded better. I mean, if he rebounds and blocks shots, not even at like peak Miles Turner level, but at least like 75 to 80% of it, you're getting a really productive player, and you're getting the 3-level scoring on offense. It's hard to walk away from that and say you're going to get something better. I think even Halliburton said, I think we talked to him about this last year, and he's like, I thought my best fit would just be a lob threat big guy that I could just throw it up to and he would dunk. But it's way better to have a guy that can score at 3 levels. There's a whole bunch of things that you can do that you can't do with a player who can't do that. So I do think he's more valuable. I think his personality really fits these guys. That having a guy that's been through everything, I think matters. So my view is as long as they feel like the direction with this core is good, he'll stick around. The reason that they would, if they would move on, it's because they just really don't like the combination anymore, and they feel like they've got to go back to the drawing board a little bit. But as long as they feel like this general formula works, then I think he's critical to the formula.
Here's a dumb question to wrap it up, Dustin. As if the previous haven't been exactly that. Pacers in action tonight, taking on Boston, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then Sunday they have Boston again in Boston, correct?
Yes.
Does a team in that situation, I'm almost embarrassed to ask this, do they ever actually treat it like 2 different road games and come back, or do they just stay out there?
Oh, they stay out there.
Yeah. That's what I figured. And then they come back, obviously, Tuesday. They've got, for New Year's Eve, a matinee, if you will, taking on the Milwaukee Bucks at the Fieldhouse. But it is Boston tonight. It is, Eddie, if I'm correct, an 11-point spread, correct?
Yep.
Celtics, obviously, at 22-8, a big favorite. Dustin, appreciate the time. A belated Merry Christmas and an early Happy New Year to you.
Same to you. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, everybody over there. Thanks so much for having me as always, guys.
And you can feel free to just go ahead and send me a message once you see the Statue of Liberty and the Hartenstein. Once you see it, you'll never unsee
Sure.
it.
At some point, at some point when it grabs me, and then I know that it's the obvious truth, then I will let you know at that moment.
I appreciate that. My buddy Pat just sent me a photo comparison. Are you starting to see it, Eddie, or are you on the fence on this?
Kind of.
Kind of which way?
I'm not sure yet.
I could do. He sent me a good shot of Hartenstein where I could do like a compare and contrast, and I think you'll see it. I'm telling you. Once you see it, you'll never unsee it. That's all I'm saying. I'm a little surprised that nobody has sent me something saying, just this is the kind of genius that you deal with, right? Dealing with these things. I don't know. There's something about the facial structure of it.
I'm just gonna sit here and mind my own business.
You're not buying into my hysteria on this one?
I think you may have taken a couple of my treats from my desk.
No. You're bringing those to work now?
Well, you brought them to me.
Well, that's a fair assessment, yes.
Multiple packages.
I don't know if I should even say this, but I was at a family gathering for the holidays.
Okay.
And one of the elder states persons of my family
asked about me. I'm honored.
Not immediate family, but extended family.
Asked about me?
No.
Oh, darn.
But kind of. We're sitting there, and out of nowhere, just says, "By the way, Jake, do you ever use the THC gummies?" And I'm like, well, no, but I know people who do. Yeah, well, my son gave me some, and they're 10 milligrams, and he told me that I probably should start with the 2 milligram first. I've never taken them before. I'm like, okay. This is totally random and out of nowhere. I was in the Army, and I never partook. But now I just, I'm curious of them. But should I stay at home? Yeah, sure. I don't know. Do you have any suggestions, Eddie?
Not on the air.
It was a very just like Merry Christmas to you too, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah, I couldn't get away from you either. I had somebody asking me about you at Christmas. I'm like, seriously?
Somebody asked about me?
Yeah.
I'd like to know what was asked.
Do you really want to know?
Yeah, I do. Was this a family member or a family friend?
Family member.
Okay.
Asked if the whole I'll never say it. Brooklyn story is accurate or if you're just making that up.
Brooklyn?
Yeah, Brooklyn, yeah.
No, it's true.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I'm telling you, in 1994, I was living in New York City. My parents came out to visit me. They came out to visit, and my mom thought it'd be fun to take a tour of Lower Manhattan. So we got on one of the little double-decker buses, dealios, and a very nice fella with an accent had the little microphone and was giving the tour of New York City. And we got down to Lower Manhattan where the Brooklyn Bridge is, and he said, on the left is Brooklyn, in the bridge of Brooklyn. And in his accent, he kept calling Brooklyn, Brooklyn. And my mom thought it was delightful, and so she began referring to Brooklyn as Brooklyn, and it has been a query thing ever since. So whenever I mention the Brooklyn Nets, I say Brooklyn. And I'll tell you another something that once I mention it to you, you'll never unsee. And this one I guarantee you'll agree with. And it involves the Brooklyn Nets.
There's no guarantee that I will ever agree with you on anything.
I'm betting that you agree with me on my observation in relation to the Brooklyn Nets, which I'll tell you next. And then Kevin Bowen joins us. We'll get the latest on Anthony Richardson not practicing today. We'll get into that as well. Bowen joins us at 2. It is that time of year where there are basketball tournaments galore in the state of Indiana, notably out in the – now, do we know – is Newcastle really the world's largest high school gymnasium? Hasn't that been disputed? Didn't Muncie put in more seats and then Newcastle put in more and back and forth and all kinds of debate and discussion over that? I mean, we say that Newcastle and, what's the old saying? 18 of the 20 world's largest high school gymnasiums are in the state of Indiana. How do we know at this point that they're like Nepal doesn't have a gym that has 10,000 seats? Do we know that? Do we just assume because it's in the U.S.? But I like the stat. Eddie, are you calling any games this weekend?
No, sir. I don't think so.
Because there are all kinds of like holiday tournaments taking place. And when I think of the high school basketball holiday tournaments, Newcastle's the big one. But I always go back to, nostalgically speaking, which, I guess is probably a strong or weak suit of mine, depending on which way you want to look. I go back to the high school days of, and there really was nothing else like it. And I've always wondered if, to me, it was the epicenter of the sports world. And I feel like that was the case universally in the state. But then I wonder if I wasn't jaded and just assumed that everybody was living in the same snow globe as I. And what I'm talking about is when I was a kid, in the 80s and, into the early 90s, but certainly growing up in the 80s, the Hinkle sectional and the attention of the sectional and the regionals at Hinkle, and the sectional games with all of the teams that were in it, and of course it started on Tuesday night. If you didn't get the first round bye, you played Tuesday night, and then Thursday, Friday, Saturday, the whole deal. And that led to regionals, and the regionals would be on Channel 4, and there was always the early morning games on Saturday, and then the two games on Saturday, and then the championship on Saturday night. And to me, retroactively, it feels and it seems like everybody was watching Channel 4 and watching those games on Saturday morning. And it might just have been that I thought that because I was a kid and I was invested in high school sports because my sister was in high school and whatever else, and maybe the attention was no greater than it is even today. I don't know. But when I think of those games, in particular the night games, the sectional finals that would be aired on Channel 4, and for that matter, back then, even like the semifinals and everything else, the floor, I can still envision the floor and the background at Hinkle, which looks the same but different because obviously it's been renovated and redone so many times now with Butler moving up into the Big East and etc. But those night games of the sectional finals and the big crowds and everything else, the lighting was such. Mackey Arena had really dark lighting back in the early to mid 80s. So too did the Illinois Assembly Hall. The lighting, the floor was lit. It was cool. The floor was lit, but you kind of couldn't see the stands. All you could see at Mackey was that scoreboard that's down on the floor in the corner. And then in Hinkle, it was the same way. You would see the game, but you kind of couldn't see, other than the tight shots, the crowd and everything else. It was kind of
like
magical.
the Lakers?
What's that?
Kind of like the Lakers?
The Lakers do that now, yes. The floor that looks exactly like that in the way the floor is painted and the darkness of it is, and I don't know the name of their arena now, where the Brooklyn Nets play in Brooklyn.
The Barclays Center?
Barclays Center, yeah, I think that's right. I mean, that's what it was originally. I don't know if that's what it still is. But the Barclays Center, when you watch a Nets game, and maybe it's because for a while there in their first year they had the logo. I loved when they did the rebranding of the Nets, and I was kind of a weird New Jersey Nets fan when I was a kid. I liked Michael Ray Richardson, and it was different to be a fan of the Nets. So that was kind of my second team. I even have a New Jersey Nets hat to this day. Now, would that be retro, Eddie, if I have a New Jersey Nets hat?
Yes.
Like
Vintage?
Vintage, yeah. Is that a cool, like, would I be hip if I wore that?
Oh, yeah, Jake. You'd be so hip.
Well, I am hip. People tell me that all the time. When I go out, they're like, the thing about you that I like, you're stylish and you're hip. I'm like, well, thank you. But the court itself, when they redid and rebranded once they moved to New York, they had such a clean look. And I know they were originally in New York, but city. But they had such a clean look, and that simplicity of the black with the white B, the Brooklyn B, looked kind of like the old Butler floor. And so when I would watch those games, that's what it looked like to me. And it was cool. It was very cool. Loved it. Loved everything about it. I mean, Hinkle, not necessarily the Nets. But if you ever go back, Eddie, and you get on YouTube and you go back and you look at one of the old classic games at Hinkle, Alford taking on Broadable or whatever it might be, you're going to look at it and go, yeah, okay, I can see it. And then if you watch a Brooklyn Nets game, you can see it. Anthony Richardson is not practicing today.
Do you have an update on that?
You do have an update?
Yes.
Do we have the breaking news sounder?
I wouldn't put it in the breaking news category, but sure.
The latest with Anthony Richardson.
Not being ruled out, Shane Steichen said, quote, "We'll see."
Okay. This leads to my somewhat conspiracy theory, does it not?
I think so. We have a poll up on query_company on Twitter, by the way.
And the poll is?
Should the Colts rest Anthony Richardson if they are eliminated from playoff contention prior to Sunday's game?
If he's hurt, then that changes things. Again, I'm going to go back to what I said earlier. There are kind of two ways to look at it. If he simply has like nagging pain that is not debilitating and it cannot progress, then I think you use the opportunity to continue to learn of playing through pain at the NFL level, because that's kind of part of what the job is.
Especially this time of the year.
Totally, right? I mean, guys have told me, and I mean, I'm not, this isn't exclusive to me. I mean, this is a fairly common narrative or conversation. Just the discussions of how long it takes to get out of bed in the morning on a Monday. Everything aches, everything's sore. I mean, it is a collision sport. With that said, I do believe this. If you look at the scenarios, do you happen to have in front of you, Eddie, the situations that have to take place for the Colts to make the playoffs?
I can get them in front of me.
Because one of the things, there are basically 3 steps. There are 2 different paths, if you will, on how they get in. Path number 1 is the first thing that has to take place, and this is the prerequisite before anything else can even be looked at. They have to win out.
Correct.
The Colts have to win the remaining 2 games, and they play arguably the 2 worst teams in the league. Now, for that to happen, then what has to happen?
So, option number 1, the Chargers lose both of their final games. They are at New England this weekend, tomorrow.
Okay.
And they are at Vegas against the Raiders.
Okay.
So that is path number 1.
Okay.
The other path for the Colts making the playoffs involves the Broncos, Dolphins, or Bengals. Colts need to win their final 2 games over Giants this weekend and then at home against Jacksonville next weekend. They need the Broncos to lose their final 2 games. They have the Bengals tomorrow afternoon.
Okay.
And Kansas City. Now, will Patrick Mahomes be playing, or will it be Carson Wentz? That's a big question. And then the final element of that is for the Dolphins. They are at Cleveland and at New York Jets and or the Bengals, who face the Broncos and Steelers to win their final 2 games. That would mean 3 or 4 teams are tied at 9-8, and the Colts would win the tiebreaker based off of best conference record.
So here's the thing. The Chargers play tomorrow.
Yes.
Against New England.
Yes.
If they win, then the Chargers are eliminated as a team that factors for the Colts, correct?
Correct.
Which means the Colts still have a way to get in.
Correct.
Denver has to lose 2 games.
Correct.
And Cincinnati has to win 2.
Correct.
So if Denver beats Cincinnati, then Denver and Cincinnati are both eliminated, right? As
So you're saying if Denver beats Cincinnati?
If Denver beats Cincinnati, then Denver and Cincinnati are no longer factors for the Colts.
Correct, and the Colts would be eliminated.
What if, but do they still have the Miami way?
No, because Denver would be ahead of them.
Gotcha. So it is possible. This is my point, the big payoff here, the drum roll, if you will. It is possible tomorrow, if the Los Angeles Chargers win their game tomorrow afternoon, and then later at 4:30, or after that, because the game starts at 4:30, if Denver defeats Cincinnati, it is very possible that at the time that Saturday Night Live is coming on the air tomorrow night, the Colts will know that they are out of the playoffs, correct?
Correct.
So if the Colts know definitively on Saturday evening that on Sunday they are playing their penultimate game of the regular season, but it is now officially a regular season that will not go into the postseason, does that then factor into their decision as to the availability of Anthony Richardson? I don't know that answer, but I'm asking rhetorically, because if they know definitively tomorrow night that they still have postseason to play for, that it is still a possibility that they can play in the postseason, does that factor in to whether or not they go with Anthony Richardson? And if so, which then do they weigh as the greater priority? Anthony Richardson learning how to play through the pressures of that moment? Or do they say Richardson, because of the injuries, gives us less chance to win than does a healthy Joe Flacco? Those are decisions they have to make, but I do think they are decisions that absolutely factor in, and they will be very closely watching, obviously, what happens, not only to know their availability or chance of the playoffs, but also simply to know whether or not they take the risk of injury to their quarterback or they want him to learn from it. There are many, many different factors that can be seen as pluses or minuses of him going out there. But there's no doubt about the fact that they're going to be watching what happens.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to assume that that factors into their determination whether or not the guy that is still, I think, seen as their franchise quarterback gets the opportunity to go for the last two games. I started doing something pretty cool and fun a couple of months ago. I don't know.
Hanging out with me.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Jake, are we friends, by the way?
We're colleagues.
Okay. Eddie White asked me last night during the World's Greatest Post-Game Show. He goes, what does Jake call you? I said, he goes, friend or colleague? I said, well, I'd hope friend, but I know he'd say colleague.
How about buddy?
Yeah.
You know, there are those. You can always tell when somebody doesn't know your name.
Yes.
What are the euphemisms one uses when they don't know your name?
My man.
Yeah.
Buddy.
Bro.
Yeah, I'm not a big bro guy, though.
Big guy.
Yeah.
Chief.
Pal. Boss.
Boss. That's a good one.
What's up, boss?
Yeah, it's
How
not
you doing?
bad. That's not bad. There's a guy in this building that calls me Mr. Query, and finally I'm like, hey, listen.
Really?
Jake is fine.
Really?
Yeah. Yes, I would say that we are buddies, yes. I mean, you've met Shannon
Got
out.
it on the record.
You've met Shannon out, yes. You know, and
I've met Shannon more than once.
She didn't even comment on the size of your cranium.
Yeah, I don't know what she's doing with a guy like you. She's very nice and polite and respectful.
I've heard that before, yes. So growing up and in through college and, you know, and after college in particular, I mean, through my 20s for sure, I had a buddy still, a good buddy of mine, Jeff Hester. Hester and I went to North Central together. We went to IU together, and he was also an English major at Indiana. He's now an attorney, but so he was pre-law basically. But we had a lot of English classes together in school, and he's kind of like Finch from American Pie. He was like the guy that, you know, drank cappuccinos and used a fountain pen, and I think he drank wine in college, that kind of thing. Very sophisticated guy, and a big baseball fan. He's the guy that I went to when I was in my mid-20s. We took a trip together completely randomly. We went to San Diego together and went to a Padres-Dodgers game. Jeff's a big Dodgers fan. We went, and it was great. I mean, being in San Diego was wonderful, and I mean, I had no money, but we had a lot of fun together. And he's married, and, you know, we never drifted apart per se, but, you know, life just kind of gets in the way, whatever. And I would actually encourage this for anybody listening of people that you have in your life that's of similar circumstance. And by that I mean, you know, we've always been very close, but just, you know, one of those guys that you might go a year without seeing him or running into him, and then you pick up and it's like you saw him the day before. So in the mid-fall, I don't remember which of the two of us contacted the other, but we just decided that every other Thursday we're going to get together and go to a different landmark place in Indianapolis for a beer or a dinner or whatever. Many of which we've gone to many times, many others that were like, you know, hey, this would be a cool place to check out. I've never really been there before. We've done, both Jeff and I in college worked at Daddy Jack's, so we did Daddy Jack's one time. We were going to do Working Man's Friend, but they close early, and on Thursdays they close, I think, at 3 o'clock or maybe even 2. So we weren't able to do Working Man's Friend, but it's obviously a great place. John's Famous Stews, which I think now is called John's Hot Stew, is on the list. We've both been there, but that's one of them that we're going to hit. Trying to think of other area. Oh, we did the Red Key, which is, you know, a staple. Last night we did, and it was his suggestion, and a place that he has been a regular, and I have only been really probably once in the last 20 years or so. And I certainly know of it and have driven past it 100 times. And it's not by any means anything out of the ordinary or incredibly like unique discovery, but it was for me. I had never really gone into the back smaller bar area of the Broadable Brew Pub. And we went in and sat down. They got a fire going, and there were 10 people in there yesterday. And such a cool little joint and just a cozy atmosphere, perfect for this time of year. And just sat and we caught up on, you know, just discussing baseball, and we talked about, you know, travel and whatever else. And there was a couple at the table next to us that we struck up conversation with, that Anna and Jeffrey, that had gone to North Central and were a few years below the two of us and it was fun to chat with them and catch up with them. But there's just such a magic about a place like that that's cozy and quaint. And the other thing that was taking place, and I have never really known of like Broadwell Brew Pub as a place for this, but apparently it is like the host bar for Liverpool fans of the Premier League. And Liverpool was playing yesterday, and they won 3-1. I can tell you that much. And I guess the sign of a good time or a good bar or a good conversation, and we each had one beer, truth be told, but I looked up at one point and I said to Hester, I said, "Oh man, like this game must be on tape delay or something." And he said, "Why?" And I said, "Well, it's now in the 88th minute, and we walked in, it was like in the 43rd minute." And he said, "Yeah, well, we've been here over an hour now." Really? I thought we'd been here like 20 minutes. But the fun thing about it was, if you've watched Ted Lasso, which I have and really enjoyed, I'm not a huge, what's that?
Barbecue sauce.
That's right. I'm not a huge soccer fan, but as Jimmy has discussed, when he went to England, he went and found the actual, AFC Richmond area where the movie was filmed, including the pub where they film it. And they have the little peanut gallery of fans that are watching all the games in the same pub with the female bartender in the show. And it's so charming, and it shows kind of the unity of sport that it really does kind of make you want to just go over there and find some English club and root for them and go into a pub and have a beer or Diet Coke, perfectly sufficient, and just watch matches and that kind of thing. And that's kind of what it was like yesterday. And I'm telling you what, and it used to like annoy me, but I guess now either, through my maturity or just being more open to different experiences. I mean, these people with this soccer match with Liverpool were like, every single kick. Oh, they were just going, you would have thought that like the sun was rising or setting based on that. Now, Eddie, do you have an English Premier team?
No.
My buddy Matt Jacklin, who was in town, picked a team, and he's a fan of them because their logo looked like our middle school logo. And he's all in on them. And he lives in Denver now, and he watches like every match, and he's all in. And he knew like second tier and third tier leagues. And I'm like, are you the same guy I grew up with? Because it just was foreign to us, right? Pardon the term there, but it just was, you just didn't hear about it. It's only been in the last, what would you say it's been since the Premier League has really been kind of a regular part of the sports menu in the United States? 15 years?
Sure. It's never been on my menu, so I have no idea.
You don't follow it all? That surprises me.
No. Cannot do it. And I know the hypocrisy is like, but Eddie, you can sit there and watch baseball all day, but you can't watch soccer. Yeah, I know. I can't.
I get it. Here's the thing. I've moved the goalposts with my soccer take from totally sarcastic and apathetic about it to having an appreciation for people's understanding and excitement for it, but still not necessarily a complete understanding as to why. You know what I mean? Like, you do you, that's cool, but I don't really get the whole thing.
Our YouTube chat, aka the lounge, or not the lounge, but the break room, has some very hard pressing questions, Jake.
Okay.
Grady would like to know why you're so mean to me.
I don't think I am at all. I think I'm a nice fellow. In what way am I mean to you?
Oh, you're always talking down to me. You're always making fun of me. You're chastising me for certain things.
Do you feel that way, or does simply the people in the break room?
I'm not going to share my feelings, Jake. I am a professional.
Okay. It's an open forum.
I know.
If we are indeed,
I don't need to air out my grievances for everyone.
If we are indeed friends,
if we are
amongst friends, you should be able to express what it is that bothers you.
And if we're professionals, Jake, then we can do this behind the scenes. Nobody else needs to hear this if we're adults and mature.
Now, I did have yesterday a listener of the show that I talked to, really nice guy, lives in Texas, and he said he listens to the podcast variation of the show, and he enjoys. He said, I really enjoy Eddie, mostly the age difference.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So there is, I have to remind myself
Between
that
who?
there's an age
You and Jimmy, or me and Jimmy, or me and you?
well, the age difference between myself and the two of you is essentially the same, right? My buddy, by the way, a fan of Crystal Palace. That's the club. I'm sorry, not a fan, a supporter. He's a supporter of Crystal Palace. And I'm like, why? And he said, because their logo looks like Eastwood. I'm like, dude, we went to school there 40 years ago. But I had told him that I was originally a fan of Ipswich or whatever it is. But I think now that Nottingham also has got my eye. They're up to third on the table.
Look at you. Look at you go.
They're rising. Ipswich, on the other hand, trying hard not to be relegated. You like that?
That's enough soccer talk for you before you
Doing the
go
best I
way
can.
out on the deep end.
Anthony Richardson is the big talk, and Kevin Bowen will join us next. We'll get the latest on what's going on with AR5 out on West 5-6 next. Fitting that with Kevin Bowen coming up, you would play John Parr, right?
Thank you for acknowledging that.
Eddie White says I'm mean to you. I don't think I'm mean at all. I think I'm a nice fellow.
Should I make up another poll on Corey_company on Twitter
Sure.
or on X or whatever? Is Jake mean to Eddie?
I pointed out that you have a large head. I bring you gifts, right?
You do? I think those are just like to make me feel better about myself.
Guilt trip
Yeah.
trips.
Yeah. You feel bad for all the
They're
all
not
the
for-
things you say about
I bring
me?
you gifts not from a road trip, but a guilt trip. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like when you go to Canada to get more of those ketchup
The
ketchup chips.
Listen, those things are awesome, though, aren't they?
Yeah. You punished me by getting me those horrible shrimp chips that one time.
Those are fabulous.
Oh, my gosh, no.
I had the entire at LAX, the entire terminal was eating them. I was giving them out to everybody. Loved them. It's the most popular guy around.
Yeah, they felt bad. They're like, this guy must not have many friends if he's asking
Speaking of not having many
strangers.
friends, this from Alec, Eddie's only one. You're not mean to Eddie. He deserves the flack.
Okay, what the heck?
That's exactly what it says. Just so you know. I appreciate Alec listening to the program.
Why does everyone side with you? That's my problem here. Everyone sides with Jake.
Because I'm innocent. That's why.
No, you're not.
Hey, Jake, on Thursdays, you should go have a drink at the bar at Capri Restaurant. Great bar, great fireplace. It's magic in the wintertime. Appreciate the suggestion. We'll have to check that out. Somebody else says 9th Street Bistro in Noblesville. Very good. All right. Hester and I will make a trip there. Now, then you also have to have the places that you go where, like, you don't want anybody to know you're going there because it's just it's your place, right? You got a couple of places like that where you're like, yeah, I like it because it's just off the beaten path and you want it to kind of be your own, so to speak. You got any places like that, Eddie? Any haunts?
Not really.
If you and Alec, your buddy,
yeah,
if you guys went out and you were going to meet for, like, at a bar somewhere to just hang out and watch a baseball game, watch your Reds play, what would you get?
Are you talking about to drink or to eat?
Yeah, both.
It depends on the mood. I would for sure get a beer. I just don't know which brand I would get. And then probably, depending on the time of day, if it's during the day, probably like a chicken sandwich or a chicken wrap or something.
What about my PBR party? Would you come to my PBR party?
Ooh.
Diet Coke's perfectly sufficient.
If I get a free drink out of it, then yeah.
So if I bought you a pint of PBR.
Yep.
Like some Pacer. Well, you can't do it on a Pacer game, though, right?
That would be correct. Unless I took the night off.
That might be worth it to come to the PBR party, right? Just a bunch of guys sitting around and gals having a PBR watching the Pacers?
Depends. Are you going to talk down to me like you do every day, Monday through Friday?
Do. Well, I mean, I'm 6'4". What are you, 5'6"? Of course. Right? It's only natural.
That was well played there.
Anthony Richardson is watching from practice today. Now, it is a foot injury, and then what's the other aspect of it?
Back. A sore back.
You wonder, and when we talk to Kevin Bowen going to join us a couple of minutes from now, we'll get into this as to whether or not the situations for the Colts come into play as to whether or not he is utilized and plays in the game. The other question, frankly, for fans would be this. And this sounds absurd to ask. And you're probably going to hear me ask it a lot, especially next week, if the Colts win and the Chargers lose and, all the things happen. If we get back together again on Monday and the Colts are still mathematically alive for the playoffs. Like last night, somebody asked me, Eddie, they said, what are the odds that the Colts make the playoffs? And we're at the Pacer game. And I said, well, to put it in Pacer terms, the Colts making the playoffs is about the same likelihood as blank player having a game where he leads the Pacers in scoring. What player did I pick?
Jarris Walker?
Not bad. It's not who I went with, but that's not bad, right? Because it can happen, but a lot of things have to take place.
Ben Shepherd?
Bingo. That's exactly what I said. I said the Colts making the playoffs are about like if Ben Shepherd goes out and has a game where he leads the Pacers in scoring. It's possible, but it's not probable, okay? Now, what I want to know, and what I'll probably ask a lot more next week, and it sounds absurd to ask this, do you want the Colts to make the playoffs? I know that sounds crazy. Somebody's driving right now from Denver to Philadelphia. They're driving through Indianapolis, Indiana, and they're scanning the radio dial, and they landed on this show, and they're like, you're not going to believe what some moron in Indianapolis was at. He was asking if they would want to make the playoffs. But for the fan base themselves, when you consider everything that comes with it, it almost guarantees that you're going to run it back next year. It almost guarantees that everybody stays the same in terms of from the administration on down. it almost guarantees that you, and maybe it's only a couple of spots in the draft, it changes a little bit your scheduling perhaps for next year. But it gives, and furthermore, do you feel they have earned this year the right to go to the playoffs? And I don't know, I'm asking somewhat rhetorically, is it possible if you're a Colts fan to be a fan and because of your fandom and because you want the best for them, that you actually want them to not go? Is that possible? You know? Hey, Jake, this from David, or actually to Eddie. Not everybody sides with Query. The ones that side with you, meaning Eddie, are silent because Jake talks enough as it is. I'm a talk show host.
Well, somebody did side with you in the break room.
Oh, yeah?
Anyone who doesn't know an answer that includes Richard Nixon deserves the flack.
Who's that said that? Did I say that, by the way?
Pat Welch. That was yesterday with the trivia question.
What president resigned the presidency because of Watergate?
You didn't tell me Watergate, but yeah.
Yeah, I did.
No, you didn't say that.
I said he later became president but had to resign it due to the Watergate scandal in which he said, I am not a crook.
Yeah.
Would you like, okay, you give me a question that you think someone should know that is more slanted towards your age demographic and see if I can give you the answer.
I'm not good on the spot. I need some time to prepare. And does not sound like KB will be joining us today.
By the way, the Pop Culture Jeopardy that you are watching, that is hosted by who?
Scarlett Johansson's husband, Colin Jost.
Yeah, okay, that's what I thought. So I saw him recently on a show, and he was giving a few sample questions of it, and I will admit to the fact that I found it to be like pretty challenging.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, wow, this is hard. It was kind of hard, right?
It is for me because I'm not as well. I am not very up to date with pop culture trivia.
Well, like of current pop culture or all time pop. I mean, you're wearing a sweatshirt that's of pop culture.
Yeah, both. If it pertains to sports, I may have a 50-50 shot. But in terms of like music or entertainment, I got no chance.
None.
Probably
You're
none.
pretty musically inclined, though. Like, you are aware of...
If you told me to name, like, a singer or somebody from a specific band, more times than not, I could probably not answer the question.
No, but what's fascinating is... Now, I will say this. And okay, we'll ask the break room this question. Does it make me mean that I was incredulous and perhaps overly critical of the fact that you had never heard the song Hey Jude by the Beatles? Does it make me mean that I was like, what?
I don't think that's mean. That's more of like you being surprised.
I was disappointed, Eddie. I wasn't angry with you. I was just disappointed. Now, question is, and I understand if Kevin Bowen is not available to talk, but is it because there's something going on at the Colts complex that he's covering?
I'm
is
not
there anything
100%
new? Is there
sure.
anything new going on with that?
He just told me that he was still writing, so he doesn't think he'll be able to join today.
Okay, that's understandable. And again, and I'm sure a big part of what he is writing, which will be on the website later today at 1075thefan.com, I would think with that, the big story that he's talking about is the fact that Richardson did not practice today. But it doesn't sound like there's anything new in terms of the Colts' explanation of that or where they stand in terms of him and his availability for Sunday. Jennifer, by the way, has made a poll here. Is Jake mean to Eddie? I'm going to go ahead and vote on this. No. Right now, no is leading 50-50. Now, I'm guessing, Eddie, does that mean that you voted?
No, I haven't voted.
I'm going to... Oh, wait a minute. Now, how's this possible? I voted no, but it says that 0% have voted no. Did it change my vote? What the heck?
Maybe it's fixed.
It is
kind of like the Derek Schultz, Jake Query.
Yeah, that was absurd. That is, listen, there was a survey done as to whether or not, of who's sexier between myself and Derek Schultz. That is not even, that was so rigged. There's zero chance that I lose that poll. Zero. Even Derek admits it. Even Derek is like, okay, yeah, I mean, you look like you'd be on TV. Okay. I'm just saying. Last night, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was mean to the Pacers. That is a fact.
Yep.
He hit a shot late in that game.
The three from the top? Is that the one you're talking about?
Yes. And I mean, and Eddie, there are times in sports when you watch a player and you simply say, okay, there's nothing that you can do there. And he hit a shot. He was contested. I mean, it was not, and I can't remember the exact, I'm going to say, and I'm going off memory here, it was within the last 3 minutes of the game or so. And it made it like from a 1 to a 2 possession game. It might have even been in the last couple of minutes. But he hit a 3 from the top of the key. He ended up with 45. And at that moment, it was very clear who the guy on the floor was. It was the kind of performance, the only other guy that I can recall seeing like that, like take over a game where you just knew he was going to win, was on the floor last year when Anthony Edwards literally said, we're going to win this game and I'm going to carry us to the win. And Alexander had that look last night. And they were just, the Pacers were in control of that game for 92% of it. And then at the end of the game, the last 3 to 5 minutes, Oklahoma City just executed and the Pacers had empty possessions. I mean, it came down to that. It was really impressive. And Oklahoma City is a good young team, and their ball movement and other things are absolutely outstanding. I mean, their ability to get open shots and hit open shots at all times, it feels like they have 4 shooters and a rebounder on the floor. I mean, Hartenstein is really good at keeping possessions alive and screening to get guys open, and their offense is very efficient. And that comes from the fact that they have guys that can shoot from all areas of the floor. And when it comes down to it, and this is the big thing, they have a guy that everybody knows is going to be the guy taking shots, and you guard him, and he scores anyway. Halliburton was double-teamed. They did a really good job with him, but he couldn't get his own shot off last night, and so he started, Nembhard had a good game, but they've got to get Halliburton more offensively aggressive in late moments like that. Joining us now, by the way, on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest line, his writing apparently has wrapped up. Kevin Bowen joins us. Of course, you hear him on the morning show with Andy Sweeney, the Wake Up Call with KB and Andy, and the primary Colts writer for the website 1075thefan.com. Kevin, we'll begin with this, and that is with Anthony Richardson. We know, not practicing again today, but Shane Steichen, correct me if I'm wrong, or just simply, I guess, put it to us in the simplest of language. Steichen stands where or is expressing what in terms of the availability for Richardson in New York?
Yeah, no commitment either way, so a lot of gamesmanship from Shane Steichen here on this Friday afternoon. He did not practice all week, and by my rough estimate, I think it's 26 guys the Colts have had miss an entire week of practice this season. I can only recall one playing in the game. That would have been DeForest Buckner back in week 2. And if you remember that game, he was on a pitch count up in Green Bay. So very, very rare for a player under Steichen to, again, miss an entire week of practice and play in the game. But as of this conversation right now, Shane Steichen says Anthony Richardson still has a chance to play.
Okay. Kev, I'm not trying to be a conspiracy theorist by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm curious your thought on this. There are games tomorrow that involve actually the 3 key teams that Indianapolis needs to keep an eye on for their playoff potential. The Chargers and then the Bengals and Broncos are playing one another. It is possible, while not probable, it is possible that tomorrow night the Colts will officially be eliminated from the playoffs. I'm fairly certain that is a possibility to happen, that it mathematically could be in play. Would that factor in at all as to the availability of Anthony Richardson?
Yeah, it's funny. I asked Shane that very question just an hour ago, and he said no. And I'd probably agree with him, actually, just because that would happen so late in the night. That second game, Cincinnati-Denver, it's a 4:30 game. So, I mean, if that gets over, 7:38, are you really going to all of a sudden have, one meeting and be like, yeah, about that, we're just going to start Flacco. Frankly, I think there's a lot of gamesmanship from Shane Steichen. If you're going to kind of make me have a call on this, I just think it's super rare to have a player miss an entire week of practice and play, let alone that player being a quarterback. And I mean, if you look at the weather for Sunday, it's exactly what it is outside. So, is that, at play at all, in your decision? Again, Shane didn't make that, it's not weighing totally, but still, I think that would be hard to ignore if you're kind of risking further injury here. So if I had to guess right now, I'd say Joe Flacco is your starter.
Is there something to be gained, though? Okay, let's go back to this, Kevin. What exactly is the injury to Richardson? When was it, when did it take place, and how nagging does it appear to be?
Yeah, so 2 injuries on the injury report, back and foot. He mentioned it's more of a back issue than a foot issue. Not necessarily one play against Tennessee. If you go back and you watch that game, he never got checked out during the game. I don't think you could point to any kind of obvious play. The touchdown that was overruled, I would say that was one play where I kind of watched Richardson a lot after that play where, he took a big hit, kind of lowered his head on the goal line. So, again, maybe something there happened. But, again, if you watch the whole game, that final drive, he delivers, one of his few throws of the day, delivers it on target, and then he ran. He actually slid on the final run of the afternoon. So, again, I don't think there's, one crystal clear play from the game. It sounds like he has been very, very sore and in a good amount of pain all week long. But, yeah, a little bit more back than foot issue.
Is there something that can be gained, Kevin, by saying, look, this year has been about the development of Anthony Richardson. And I mean this not as a knock on Anthony Richardson, but a reality of the National Football League. If you're going to be a franchise quarterback in the NFL, part of that is playing through pain. Now, you don't want to do anything that's going to debilitate or can grow pain, can worsen a situation. But even if they've been eliminated and there's nothing to play for, is it possible that they could say, you know what? This is another learning opportunity. It's another growth opportunity of learning and seeing that at times, even when you're not 100% as a quarterback in the NFL, you got to play through it. And thus, they decide to go with it.
Yeah, it's funny, Jake. I feel like I'm a tad torn. I probably side with you in what you're asking of, yes, you're not always going to have your fastball. You aren't always going to be at 100%. You can't have perfect health. So you got to learn how to play when maybe that run element is cut off a little bit and you don't have kind of your bread and butter trait. But I also sit here on December, whatever it is, 27th, and say, at this point of the season, I think the most important part of Richardson's future development, however you want to label it, is he needs a healthy offseason. His problems are not going to be fixed Sunday in rain in New York. His problems, if they ever are going to get fixed, are going to have to be fixed with a serious, committed, probably multi-month plan of, retooling his fundamentals, stripping it down to the studs, if you will. That sort of focus and commitment, I think, to a healthy offseason. And for some reason he goes out there on Sunday and makes his back issue worse. Does that hinder that at all? That there is still that burr on the other shoulder that, reps are extremely valuable. I think you lay out some reasons why you would want to kind of test his mettle, if you will, in this sort of moment. But at the same time, I'm like, man, if you further risk injury and all of a sudden, that knocks off a couple of months of the offseason, that is a part of me that I just can't ignore.
Kevin Bowen is our guest. He's on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. The Colts getting set for probably the worst team in the league, the New York Giants, coming up on Sunday. Colts have to win out New York and then Jacksonville here, and then they have to have a variety of different things to take place in order for them to get into the playoffs. Aside from Anthony Richardson, Kevin, injury report-wise, we're looking at what else?
Yeah, so nobody was ruled out. So I would say the names that I am watching, Alex Pierce needs one final clearance from concussion protocol. He practiced all week long, so it looks good on that end. And then do we see Juju Brett? Obviously, the local product. He's now practiced 2 straight weeks. They would still need to make a roster move for Juju to play in the game. He's now at day 14 of a 21-day window. So, he hasn't played since the opener. If he were to get back to the lineup, I guess I would leave him 2 games. But obviously, he's another guy that falls in the category of Floyd just desperately needs any sort of reps. So, yeah, Quentin Nelson was back. Mo Alley Cox was back. A couple other guys that have popped up on the injury report this week. So, all in all, I'd say the Colts are in a decent bill of health.
guys have discussed this in the morning, Kevin, and I just brought it up, and I really think this ramps up if they are still mathematically within play next week heading into the Jacksonville game. But if you had to guess it, and you really put truth serum in people, you think people want them to make the playoffs this year, knowing all that comes with it, and that it would almost assure a total run back and, hey, look how close we were, and maybe even facilitate the fool's gold that led to this point of people thinking they were closer than maybe they are?
Yeah, I mean, we did the poll. It was right after the Denver game. I'd be curious if the poll results are different now. But we did a poll right after the Denver game, pretty much that question. Do you want the team to make the playoffs? No changes. Do you want them to miss the playoffs? Changes. I think at the time it was like 88% to 12 or something drastic, wanting them to miss the playoffs and then have changes. Now that, theoretically, if we did the poll like early next week, they've won 2 in a row. What if Taylor looks good again? Would that poll be closer to 50-50? It probably would be. I still don't think it would be overwhelming, though. It's probably more of a reality of like, no. I've read this book before. I know how it'll end. I know it's different actors. You're not going to Buffalo and winning a playoff game, or going to Baltimore and winning a playoff game, or however you kind of view it. It's not like Richardson as a thrower did a whole lot to make you feel better about the situation last week against Tennessee. So it's I think if you're Jim Irsay, it's kind of the sad reality of watching what was happening inside of the Phil Stadium even last Sunday. I mean, I know you ran for a franchise record 335, but I thought it felt like an August preseason game to me, and I thought there were a lot of empty seats there. So I think there's a good amount of fans that are just kind of sick and tired of the same old. This 9-8 should, in my opinion, feel like the same 9-8 as last year if they are able to win these final 2 games. And, I thought Christmas was kind of a harsh reality, Jacob. You watch the Texans once again, win a lowly division with 9 or 10 wins. Not like they're in a great health spot. If you just could have put an ounce of pressure on them, I'm not even talking about beating them. I mean, if you just would have won one other game somewhere else, you could really, you could be playing for a home playoff game. And now, you need a multi-game parlay to go your way here in each of the final 2 weeks.
I mean, Kevin, did the benching of Anthony Richardson cost them the division?
Yeah, something I've thought about. I don't know if you beat. I don't think you beat Buffalo with Richardson, but could you have beaten Minnesota? Because if you go back to that game, I thought in that fourth quarter. I know Flacco kind of handed Buffalo some early interceptions, but the Minnesota game kind of won that point too. I don't. You probably don't win it, but could you commit to a little bit more of the Richardson-Taylor situation, and could you have had a little bit of a better chance in the fourth quarter moved along? So, that is a thought I've had, but I don't know if I could go all the way there.
Okay, Kevin, before we let you go, give me the Christmas rundown. What was the best gift that Santa brought for the kids? What was the best gift that Santa brought for you?
A police motorcycle for Maxwell Bowen. He loves it. That is probably his favorite. We also got him a Squishmallow Pumbaa. Just kind of picture a stuffed animal. It's real squishy. Pumbaa, obviously the legendary warthog from Lion King. So I would say that would be up there. Rosie got a mini, jukebox is probably too big of a term, but like a speaker with a microphone. It's top 3 gifts I'd like to take back, frankly. But, that's kind of where we're at right now. So, sound levels have been tested among, it sounds like that Friday 11 a.m., alarm that we hear. It kind of what it sounds like when Rosie starts belting out lyrics. For myself, well, it's a good question. My brother-in-law got me like an awesome Notre Dame bucket hat. It kind of looks like I'm Steve Spurrier, like in 1996 with Danny Warfel. I feel like I'm like Steve Spurrier at a Florida practice. So I can't wait to wear that when the weather calls. So I'd probably have to go there.
Kevin, Notre Dame, you're prepared for this, right? Notre Dame's going to the national title game.
Oh, stop. Stop. Now you're doing reverse psychology on me here.
I think Notre Dame's really good, but I think here's the thing. Georgia is banged up. Boise State, admittedly, I don't know as much about, and Penn State hasn't won a game that mattered that was really big since like Bill Clinton was the governor of Arkansas, right? I mean,
someone said the same thing about Notre Dame.
what's that?
Someone said the same thing about Notre Dame.
No, fair, but Notre Dame's had fewer cracks at it, and I think this Notre Dame team is really good. I think defensively they're really good, and I don't know. I'm not as big a believer in Penn State. That we were saying this earlier when I had Tom Noy on, Kevin. I mean, if you are Ohio State or Oregon, you've got to be looking at it going, what did we do to deserve this? We got to play each other, and then we win that. You get Texas potentially in Texas. I mean,
Yeah,
really?
Especially Oregon. Yeah, especially Oregon, just with them getting the 1 seed. Yeah, I am optimistic, but Notre Dame is starting to get really banged up. For those that were watching the IU game, they lost probably their best defensive player left. They lost their All-American corner back midseason. They lost Riley Mills during the middle of that game. So, trench play against Georgia is just a different animal. And I get that Georgia's got their backup quarterback, although you talk to some Georgia fans, they're happy about that. So I am somewhat optimistic, but boy, I don't know if I can sit here right now and act like, Georgia. I think Penn State's a little bit of a kind of, people aren't talking about them enough. I mean, I just think that, if they can take care of Boise, they went toe to toe with Oregon here, and I get that was maybe not a ton to play for, but still, I don't think you write off Penn State just yet either.
It'll be fun to watch, obviously, and that's coming up here in the next week or so. Kevin, happy holidays. Appreciate the time, and we will be reading your coverage of what takes place not only in preparation for this game, but with the Giants game as well on the website as well. Appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Happy New Year to both of you, and apologies for being a little late today.
No worries at all. Kevin Bowen joining us, Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line. All right, it's a feel-good, good for the heart Friday. It doesn't feel like a Friday at all. I just saw your eyes get really big there, Eddie, like you were rolling your eyes at me.
Yeah, we've got to go on a road trip first.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. I'm thinking half past. My apologies. We're going to go out to New York, and we're going to find out the Giants side of things, right?
That's right.
Okay, my apologies. We will do that, and then Good for the Heart Friday coming up about 20 from now. Colts on their way out east, take on the New York Giants coming up on Sunday. Joining us now on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line, she covers the Giants for The Athletic. Charlotte Carroll joins us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line. Charlotte, I'm going to begin with a really elementary question up front, and that is, obviously it has been a disastrous year for New York, and there are kind of two ways that teams ingest really bad seasons. One of them is everything falls apart and you get guys going in a million different directions. And then the other is it's a year that's a rebuild year, and everybody knew that from the get-go. And so therefore they kind of keep a focus from one week to the next. This New York Giants team falls into which of those two categories?
Hi, thanks so much for having me on. I feel like it's probably the first one you mentioned, just in terms of this wasn't viewed as a rebuild year. This is the third year of Brian Dable and Joe Shane's regime. They're supposed to be kind of making progress going forward. The rebuild, went a little bit quicker than anticipated just because, their playoff appearance in their first season in 2022, playoff victory, things take a back step in 23 with the injuries, kind of decimating the offensive line, and then Daniel Jones, obviously. And then this year just kind of everything fell apart, and then started with we had the quarterback change midway through, getting benched. Daniel Jones no longer even on this roster. So, and then just the quarterback kind of constant game of musical chairs ever since. So it's just very disappointing, especially for a season that was supposed to be so promising because they're celebrating the franchise's 100th season.
Let's go back to the quarterback situation. I frankly, and obviously Charlotte, I'm not seeing it week in and week out like yourself, right? So from afar, you knew that Daniel Jones was relegated, and then he holds this press conference where he essentially is thanking everybody and saying goodbye, and you think, well, that's awfully odd for a guy that's losing his starting job. And then they just decide to cut bait altogether. What was the reasoning? Was it salary motivated as to why you make that roster change midway through the year?
Yeah, you kind of had to bench Daniel Jones at that point after, it's the bye week. He'd been playing so poorly consistently that it made sense from that perspective. And it also made sense when you think about his contract and the injury guarantee. Sorry, I'm driving, so you're just hearing the wonderful New Jersey transit buses.
It's the best. No, listen, that is the true ambiance of the East. Are you kidding me? I love it.
You're getting it real. So, they make that move, and then they put Daniel Jones is obviously still on the team and kind of, doing what he needs to be doing to keep participating, kind of is relegated to fourth string. They bring in Tim Boyle. So it just kind of, you could see it coming. And then Daniel Jones is the one to go to ownership, to John Mara, and ask for a release. And then, that's kind of what's viewed as best for all parties. But it just hasn't worked out in their favor because they cannot get a quarterback consistently since that happened, just because of injuries. That's not obviously any of these coaching staff's fault. It's just the way things have worked out in that regard. And it's just been very crazy, and of course it's bound to happen once that all transpires.
What is it that New York does well? And by that I mean, if you are the Colts and you're game planning it, you are particularly aware of what that the Giants bring to the table.
It's a good question for this team that's on a 10-game losing streak. What have they been doing well? Let's see. Tyrone Tracy's been playing well as a rookie. The rookies have been impressive. We got to watch out for Malik Neighbors, who, despite everything that's happening with all the quarterback shifts, has still managed lately to put together some consistent games. So it's just hard for them to string together consistencies, and it's tough to kind of pinpoint even one area given how rough things have been.
Tyrone Tracy is a local product here, by the way. He is from, matter of fact, went to high school with Eddie, who you spoke with just before you came on here, Charlotte. Charlotte Carroll, our guest from The Athletic, the Giants beat writer. Tracy, a Purdue product, and really has made the most of opportunity in New York, playing behind Devin Singletary, but getting a lot of reps. Has Tracy been able to get reps within that offense because of the fact that it was simply necessary for him to get time, or did he earn that, so to speak? Was it attrition that put him there, or did he steadily improve and they just couldn't keep him off the field?
Yeah, no, I think it's a combo of both. You had Devin Singletary out for a little bit in the beginning of the season, forcing Tracy to come in there, and he just showed really well and was consistent, and therefore, kind of earned that position and has earned more reps. So it's been impressive For as bad as things have gone this year, you have to give, maybe it's luck of the draw. It happens every so often. This has been a promising draft class, and Tracy is one of those, especially when the Giants have lost Saquon Barkley during free agency last offseason.
Defensively, we don't know if Anthony Richardson's going to go, Charlotte, on Sunday. It looks at this point like maybe he does not, and Joe Flacco gets another chance to try to jumpstart things for Indianapolis. But defensively speaking, and again, to your point, I mean, this is a team that has struggled mightily, but they would create or possess what defensive challenges, if any, for that Colts offense?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is Brian Burns has been playing at a very consistent level. Kayvon too, just doing his job. But Burns, came in from Carolina, losing team, losing record, and he has not slowed down. He's been able to do some really good stuff. So that's, I think, the area to watch out for, and maybe creating some pressure and just some problems for Flacco or Richardson if he's in there.
Yeah, I always feel this way, Charlotte. And listen, I'm gonna be like the cynical guy here, right? Do you ever wonder when you're watching a game and think to yourself, is this the game that, like, if people that are incarcerated in Arizona and are awarded that they get to watch an NFL game on a Sunday, this is the one that they're being forced to watch? Like, doesn't it kind of feel like this game is like, really? Are you kidding me? Like, you know what I mean?
I mean, you're talking to cynical point of view. You're talking to a member of the New York media. So
I love it.
Welcome to join the club. I won't go as far as that per se, but it's one of those games. I don't even know. I feel like that's just been kind of the Giants' slate. We all thought that was the Panthers game back in Munich, that you're giving the German audience this game.
Totally. Yeah, what a way to introduce them to the game, right?
Yeah, the running joke. It's phenomenal. I was so fortunate to get to go to that game. It was a phenomenal experience. So I think the fans were loving it no matter what or who was playing, and it wasn't a horrible game. So as bad as you think it probably looks on paper, I don't know if it'll turn out that bad per se, but it's supposed to be rainy conditions. It's the Giants' home finale. They have the chance to go winless at home for the first time since 1974, extend their losing streak to 11. They're already at the franchise record 10. So it's going to be a miserable experience, I think, if you're a Giants fan, and if you're a Colts fan there, it has potential at least maybe to be fun based on the Giants' recent track record.
It's just the best, though. Everything about New York's the best. I love New York. I love all of it. I mean, the atmosphere, the fans, the cynicism, it's all encompassing for the greatest city in the world, no question. Not named Indianapolis, I should say, but
they're having a year for it between the Giants and the Jets. They're all of that.
It is drama, 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 no question about it. Charlotte, I appreciate it. I know it's a busy time. Drive safely, and certainly enjoy what you can from the coverage of it on Sunday, and we will be watching from the Giants standpoint with your coverage for The Athletic. Appreciate the time today.
Thanks so much for having me on, and I get to cover football for a living, so it's not all bad here.
That is true. That is true. No question about it. And we get to talk about it and have fun with it. Charlotte Carroll joining us from The Athletic on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest line. Now, Eddie White has voted that I'm mean to you, Eddie, okay? And I said, I just don't like Eddies in general, right? And Eddie White says, I will let Mr. Gill and Mr. Carpenter know. Now, Ed Carpenter's not Eddie, though. Nobody calls him Eddie. Dave Wilson calls him Eddie Carpenter. That's it. Everybody else, it's Ed Carpenter, right? Eddie Gill, I do like Eddie Gill. So how about this? If you go by Eddie and you are from east of the Mississippi, generally I'm cynical about you. But if you're a native of if you went to college west of the Mississippi, you're cool. And if you go by Eddie as opposed to Ed. Eddie Johnson, though, he was okay.
Eddie Murphy?
Eddie Murphy's cool. Maybe it's just Eddies that are part of the Pacers radio broadcasts. Well, that would be Eddie Gill, too, though.
That would be.
If you hail from east of the Mississippi, maybe.
Occasionally, there's another Eddie involved, but he's on the engineering side of Eddie Hazel.
Oh, I love Eddie Hazel. Worked with Eddie Hazel. Great dude. Eddie Hazel, genius, too. Genius guy. It is a feel-good, good for the heart Friday from Franciscan Health, and a story that actually Mark Dighton shared a little bit, but it is so good and unbelievable, really, that it's worth telling twice. And it has to do with heart health, and it has to do sometimes with just right place, right time, fate, and luck. I'll tell you about all of it next. Normally we do this at 2:30, but Charlotte was available then to talk about the Colts and Giants. It is a Franciscan Health Feel Good, Good for the Heart Friday. And this story, actually, Mark Dykton mentioned on the morning show briefly, but I dug a little deeper on it. And not only is it a feel-good story, it is right along the lines of what we are trying to promote for the good folks at Franciscan Health. Franciscan Health, of course, offering $49 heart scans, franciscanhealth.org/screening bundles, where you can get information on that. You can always call 833-238-0688. That's 833-238-0688. I realize that it's kind of hard to remember a telephone number when you're listening on the radio. You can always text me. I will get you all the information, or simply Google Franciscan Health heart scans. Just $49, non-invasive. Very easy to do a heart scan. You know, this time of year, the holidays, is the leading time of year for cardiovascular emergencies, for heart attacks, whether it's, you know, the change in weather, shoveling snow, the stress of the holidays, the stress of the bill paying, any number of reasons that may be the case. And we talked about that a couple of weeks ago, the fact that right now Franciscan is also offering same-day appointments for heart appointments, which is very important, right, to be able to get in right away. Now, if you are experiencing chest pain or you feel that you might be having some sort of a heart issue, then you need to get to the Franciscan emergency room. And as I have mentioned before, and I will mention one more time here, if you are actually experiencing a heart attack, which I did, you want to call an ambulance, because if you arrive at the hospital and they realize that you need to go in immediately for an angioplasty or a stent placement, they have to get the lab ready, and an ambulance is going to be able to call ahead to begin that process and also start giving you the proper medicine for blood thinning, for example, to kind of start giving your heart some help on the way there. So even though you may think, well, it's going to take 5-10 minutes for an ambulance to get here, that's 5 or 10 minutes that you're not going to have to wait once you get to the hospital. So I would strongly encourage that you do exactly that. This story actually took place on Sunday, a week ago from this Sunday, in Chicago at Soldier Field. So let's introduce you to a gentleman by the name of Ben Roth. Now, Ben Roth is from Frisco, Texas, which is in the Dallas area. As a matter of fact, I believe it is very close to the Texas Motor Speedway, which is in Denton, Texas, but all one suburban area. Ben is a diehard Detroit Lions fan. That alone can be, you know, something that a little bit faint of heart if you're a Lions fan. And the Lions actually came into play when I had my heart attack, because when I was waiting to go in to do my stent, I said to my cardiologist, so are you an NFL fan? And when he told me he was a Lions fan, I said, you should take a picture of me. And he said, why? And I said, because right now I probably look like what it looks like to be a diehard Lions fan. And he said, you know, this is pretty serious. And I said, no, I'm aware, but you got to keep things light, I guess, right? So Ben Roth is a guy about my age, and he's a diehard Lions fan. And you wonder why a guy from the Dallas-Fort Worth area would be a fan of the Detroit Lions. Well, it's pretty simple. Some 35 years ago, he started watching a guy named Barry Sanders, who, of course, was from Big 12 territory, Oklahoma State, grew up in Wichita, Kansas, and was playing for the Lions. And so Ben became a Lions fan. And he got that bug, he got that taste, and started following the Lions from afar, and eventually started going to 5 or 6 games a year to see the Lions, home and away. That diehard of a fan. Just so happens his wife is a coach at North Texas University, which is in Frisco. And so he goes to a game to see his beloved Lions play this past Sunday in Chicago, and he's down with his daughter before the game to watch warm-ups, and he's getting as close to the field as he can get with his ticket. And he happens to see a guy wearing a North Texas sweatshirt. And he's like, hey, North Texas, no kidding. Like, what are the odds of that? I mean, heck, it's rare enough to see somebody wearing that in Texas, let alone in Chicago. And so he says, look, can I get a picture taken with you? My wife will get a kick out of it. She's one of the coaches on the athletic staff at North Texas. And he says, yeah, sure. So they take a picture together, and they get chatting. And the guy from North Texas says, by the way, you're going to think this is crazy, but do you want field passes to go down the field? And Ben says, well, sure, that'd be great. And he said, yeah, I had some friends that were supposed to come to the game, and they're ill or whatever, and so I got a couple extra passes if you and your daughter want to go down on the field. So Ben Roth, who wasn't even supposed to be on the field and a Lions fan at a Bears game in Chicago, albeit from Texas, is down on the field in the most unusual of circumstances, strictly because he saw a fellow Texan in the stands. But serendipity comes into play, right? And coincidence. And so he's down on the field, and Ben looks over to his left, and he sees some people about 10 feet away from him saying, wait a minute, that man's having a seizure. And on the floor or on the ground, he sees a man having a seizure. And Ben runs over and says, everybody clear out and find for me an AED machine. This man is not having a seizure. He is about to go into cardiac arrest. And everybody's like, what are you talking about? And he says, trust me, I'm going to begin doing CPR, but somebody please go get me an AED defibrillator machine because this man's heart is about to stop. And at first, people thought he was a little bit crazy, and Ben said, trust me. And sure enough, he started doing CPR, and the Chicago Bears staff, after about 40 seconds, brought over an AED defibrillator machine, and Ben basically cleared everyone out, used the machine to tell that he had heart rhythm, but it was fading. And he could tell right then that, in fact, the man was going to go into a heart attack. So he backed everybody away and said, you need to go away far enough because these machines are very powerful that I'm about to give him the burst, if you will, to get his heart, the energy back in rhythm. And he went ahead and gave him 2 shocks, and the man, in fact, had gone into cardiac arrest and his heart had stopped. But he was resuscitated thanks to Ben's quick action and then became awake and alert enough to be able to say his name, his date of birth, and to know where he was before he was taken to the hospital, and in a holiday miracle survived. Turns out that Ben, living in Frisco for 17 years, was a paramedic and a first responder who was able to, via his experience, recognize the symptoms that this man was not having a seizure, but rather was about to go into cardiac arrest and was experiencing a heart attack. And his quick action allowed for the Bears to come over, and the ultimate teamwork here of the Bears staff and a Lions fan saving this man's life, who then was able to spend the holidays and Christmas with his family. Ben, obviously, a heroic action and a quick action, and one that comes from experience of knowing the signs and symptoms, which is exactly what he was able to do in the most serendipitous of ways to be in the right spot at the right time. You can do the same for yourself in being preventative about your heart health. A $49 heart scan from Franciscan offers a peace of mind and making sure that you are safe and good to go when it comes to your heart. All right, Eddie, the Colts and Giants taking place in New York. By the way, JMV is going to be out at Tom's Watch Bar. Great place to watch sports. Right in the old Ram location on Illinois. Plenty of time to get over there and enjoy a cold beer. Diet Coke, perfectly sufficient with John over the course of the next couple of hours. Eddie, you have a teammate and a former classmate that is going to be in this game for the Giants, but you are predicting the score to be what?
I've got Colts winning this game 20-10.
It's probably pretty close, right?
Also, the poll is pretty much over. 10 minutes left. 57% yes. 43% no. Is Jake mean to Eddie? So that is
James,
settled.
do you think I'm mean to Eddie? I don't know. James giving a non-committal yes that he
yes.
thinks I'm mean. I'm not. I think I'm very kind. I give gifts. I give support. I give advice. I give my time.
You do make fun of him when he wears a hat.
I give my energy. Well, his hat is a size 10. What do you
Make fun of me
expect?
for my hat, you.
Might be Joe Flacco on Sunday. Might be Anthony Richardson. Probably won't matter. The Giants are absolutely terrible. Colts aren't playing necessarily well. We will know probably Saturday night whether or not they still have playoff chances, but I'm kind of with Eddie. 21-6, Colts win. JMV is up next. Have a wonderful weekend. We will be back with you on Monday, and we thank you for listening to Query & Company.